We're good?
Whenever you're ready, yeah.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order and let's rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up is an update from the Arts and Culture Committee.
We had a couple slides. I don't know if you're able
Yep,
to
I'm
pull
gonna pull
those
them right
up
up.
for me, Larry.
Yep.
Hi, you guys are very close. Should we wait for Jorge?
I can even start if you feel comfortable. We
Yeah,
have
you
one
can
more
jump
person
in.
coming, he's just parking.
I can start just by introducing myself. My name's Melissa Jones. I live in the Village. You may know my partner here on the board. I've been working on the Bulldog Gallery for the past 2 years. And so this evening we wanted to give you an update on where we are with the gallery, but then also talk a little bit about this idea that we have for the Irvington Summer Fest that I think everybody is aware of, and just kind of update you on where we are with that. So if Jorge gets lucky, I'll get through this by the time he finds parking and he can do all the question answering.
Then we wanted to listen to them.
Yeah, so that's like a bonus. So the Arts and Culture Committee, I think y'all are aware, we were appointed recently, and our first public art project that we took on was the Bulldog Gallery last year. Our committee is really committed to supporting arts and culture in the Village. We have a number of members from all over the Village, including myself as the co-chair. Jorge will be here in a moment. Christina Schmidt, who's the chair and was the original, engine behind the Bulldog Gallery, as well as a couple other folks who are artists and parents and residents here in the Village. And Arlene is our board liaison. So we are planning another gallery for this year. This is a little bit of the concept art that we received from our various artists. We have a lot of really fun pieces planned, and we're starting to collect the dogs this week, so I'm getting to see them in person, and they're really, really, really exciting this year. If you go to the next slide.
Is it one with the dollar signs in front of the bank?
We have a tax accountant, and we also have the bank. So we've got a lot of financial dogs this year. So you'll be excited to see that.
I just like this hat.
So this year we have 31 sponsors. That would be local businesses who've either paid $1,000 or $550 to share a dog with another local sponsor. 8 of those are returning from last year, 15 are new. We also had a couple of neighborhood competitions where neighborhoods actually did GoFundMes to fund their own dogs. And so we have funding from Riverview Road, Legend Hollow, Main Street, and Field Point. And then we also had a couple individual gifts as well this year. We're working with 17 different artists, the majority of whom are professional artists or teachers, that sort of thing. But we do have a couple of youth artists this year and a few collaborative projects by IUSD students is what I meant to say. So we're gonna have 27 statues this year. Last year we had only 20, so this is a big increase. So 26 will be here in the Village, and 1 will be placed in front of Greenberg Town Hall to try to drive folks to come and visit the exhibit here in town. So the sponsorships and the donations that we've received so far total about $25,000, but we also have a number of expenses. The biggest expense that we have is the statue fabrication itself. I think they're made from fiberglass or plastic, I'm not sure, but they have to be printed and shipped to us, and that's quite expensive. So we've already spent that money, but we also have to pay to spray coat them so that they're weather treated and the art doesn't get damaged throughout the months that they're up. And we also have to construct a few more pedestals because we have additional dogs this year. So right now, I have my budget, I can show it to you in more detail if you're interested, but we're basically breaking even at this point. And the way that we would actually have a profit like we did last year will be through our auction and the sale of the dogs at the end of the summer. So the next steps for the gallery itself, as I mentioned, the artists are delivering their pieces this week. We are working on getting the additional pedestals built, but we also need all the pedestals installed. Last year, the DPW helped us with that, and that was incredible. So if we could get that help again, that would be great. And our goal is to have all the pieces installed no later than the 1st of June, but hopefully before that. Because we would like to do Summer Festival on June 2nd. So if you can go to the next slide, the idea with the Summer Festival, the concept here is just creating a special day to celebrate both the launch of the gallery, but also local businesses. So I have not been able to experience this, but I heard that, in years prior, we had something called an Irvington Day where the businesses would have tables out front and that sort of thing. So we kind of want to recreate that vibe, but with the addition of the art projects. Yay, Jorge's here.
Hey, Jorge.
not too bad. So the value proposition for the businesses is to create an opportunity for them to host a sidewalk sale or have an information table outside their storefront. The idea here is to allow them to create more connection to the customers who hopefully will come that day to check out the Bulldogs. For residents, we want to host activities. We're planning a scavenger hunt for kids around the Bulldog statues, games, music, just providing a reason for people to visit Main Street on that day. And then for Irvington, really what we're hoping to create is a community-driven experience to bring joy and fun to the village. Go to the next slide. And this was your slide anyway, so do you feel prepared to speak to it, or would you like me to just keep going?
Go right ahead.
Whatever you feel like. I don't want to put you on the spot.
Not at all. So what are our goals, right? I'm gonna read it right after. First of all, apologies for being late, yesterday was softball, today is dance. Anyway, so what are our goals? Right. I can dance. What are our goals? What do we want this day to be? Fun and engaging, right? It's not just about public art, it's for local business. We want to drive foot traffic to bring, we're gonna bring the art to drive foot traffic, to drive business, right? It's an all-encompassing scheme. So we set some goals here. So we want 50% of the businesses to participate. We've started that. There's some people that are very excited. I was talking to the guy at Farm Meats today. He's very excited. And we want about 250 people to check in. We're gonna have someone there, checking in people, and hopefully we get that many people. And then we're gonna have about 20 plus social media shares across Facebook, Instagram. I think you were talking about what is it, the
Hashtag, yeah, we'll
yes.
make a hashtag so
Yeah.
we can track that and hopefully raise the profile of the village a little bit.
Go Irvington Summerfest.
Woohoo. Oh, and that's it. So we're happy to answer your questions. Any other additional information you would like to have, we are here to provide it.
Sounds great. And if it's anything like what's going on Juneteenth, I mean, yes, you have it pretty well organized already.
One thing that you said your goal was to get the dogs up by June 1st. I would say try and do it by June 1st because the River Arts Music Tour is June 1st. And there's 3 Irvington locations, well 2 in this area. There's one by the Main Street School and there's one by the church.
Yes.
So I think it's the Presbyterian Church, yeah. So it'd be good because people come in for that to have the Bulldogs up by then. That's just my
Yeah,
suggestion.
that's a great idea. I mean, we did want to get them up by May 20th. So hopefully we can get them up well in advance of the 1st. Yeah, that's a good call out. We have been trying to chat with some bands to do music on the day of, on the 2nd.
I got it,
Yeah, but you guys, a lot of folks are playing the day before, so we'll see if they want to do
We can
both.
play again. The thing I told them that was the rain date for River Arts is June 2nd, but it shouldn't be a problem because the River Arts is up by the Main Street School entrance, and it's far enough apart that when one band is playing, you won't hear the other band. It's fine.
Excellent.
Oh, we're just gonna play that.
Like what?
That's the
part
River
of
Arts
the
thing.
summer
The rain day, we won't say that's the rain day, we'll be like, look, we have music all over.
We have an extra location, yeah.
We have a rain date as well, which I think is the following weekend for
following
this, yeah.
Which is the Pride celebration.
Okay, so yeah, we'll
No,
have
the
to,
8th is the Friday, right?
Yeah, 8.
so we'd be the 9th.
I'm sorry, yes.
Yeah.
Can I ask if your plans for the auction are the same as last year or different than last year?
I think likely the same, although we'd like to do a better job of promoting it. One of the challenges that we have is, we're a volunteer committee, and last year was our first year, so we've learned a lot from the way we did things last year. But even with the limited promotion that we did last year, we raised quite a bit of money. One thing is, we originally last year, our goal was to raise money and to do a beautification project in the village. And we did have profits. I think we had about $7,600 in profit from the auction after we had our expenses. But as a committee, we kind of chatted about it and we're like, we could do something really small with that $7,600, or we could use that to invest in this year's gallery and hopefully generate a larger profit this year. And then, we can decide if we want to use that money for beautification or just continuing more art projects and culture projects like this in the future. So yeah, we definitely do need to raise as much money as we can through that auction to achieve that.
I just want to say one other thing about that. I also think that the first year, Christina made the dogs herself because we were sort of like, we had a time crunch and there was really no time to send them out. So it was just like sheer will and hours of labor.
She
So-
also spray coated them all
Yeah.
herself in her home, which is really toxic and dangerous.
Right.
So we're paying to have them spray coated this
Yeah.
year, which is very smart.
Yeah.
So
So
one of
that, a lot of that money, sorry, just to say that, so we use that money to like say, okay, we're gonna use that and have the dogs.
Fabricated.
Fabricated, cause made sense to do that.
And just one point I wanted to touch on was that ties into the beautification, the art, and the business is, one thing I've noticed is when there's successful new business that's, you know, being driven by new foot traffic and new excitement, there's beautification that comes along with it. I noticed today at Savvy Sips, they have new benches outside, they're nicely painted. I was watching the farm eats being painted and designed, and so and the new coffee place is really having a buzz. I was watching people social media account stuff, taking pictures and stuff. So I think that's actually at the core of what we want to do. What's part of the arts and culture committee, I think for me at least, is that I want to create a buzz here, or we want to create a buzz here to create foot traffic, to drive business, right? To create a buzz here.
So as soon as you have information that you want to get out, or even if you want to tease it,
Yep.
you tell us, probably Larry or me,
Thank you very much.
because we can either put it in the village email, or I can put it in the, you know, mayor's letter or something like that.
And that's
Thank you
super
very much.
helpful.
And Maureen is here. Maureen also said she would share it on the social media
Great.
of the rec. And the mayor's gonna be the sticker giver for the kids.
The
for
scavenger hunt.
scavenger
They get to shake
And
your
you'll be
hand.
part of the scavenger hunt.
Maybe part of it, that's what I
It's
said.
gonna be
better
the
title.
winner. It'll
No,
be
no,
the
you-
last
Sticker
one.
giver.
There's gonna be
There's a
lots.
better title. We'll
Find
figure out a better
Yeah.
title.
Yeah, no, or find a village official and either get a signature or something.
No, it's just you.
All right,
The
great.
rest of us are like, nope.
You know I can run.
Yeah, I guess it'll be me because I know.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, here we go. Presentation of Irvington Reservoir Dam Engineering Assessment.
Less fun.
No, I don't know, it depends on your perspective.
Far less.
If you're living down slope from a dam, you want to know that it's safe, so might not be fun, but good for you.
All right.
So,
Broadcast that.
Yeah, I'm gonna get it right on now. Let me just get here.
Mark Lukasik, Tectonic Engineering, good evening. Thank you all. Pleasure to be here and pleasure to meet you all in person. So thank you for taking a few minutes here. I'd like to run through, 15, 20 minutes plus or minus to give you the highlights. If you have an urgent desire to ask a question, absolutely fine. Otherwise, I can buzz through and we can go through questions at the end. All right, if you could. We were retained by the village to perform a second engineering assessment on the reservoir dam. The first one was about 12 years ago. They are generally required every 10 years, and it's basically taking your dam to the doctor, so to speak, for a checkup to see what the circumstance is surrounding the facility. You've got two dams. This is one, the other one, Halsey. That one was completed with its engineering assessment a few years ago, and those circumstances are well known. It's not due for another one for some time. The first engineering assessment at the Waterworks Dam, the Irvington Reservoir, was probably done roughly when the state issued their guidance documents on how to actually do one. They issued the rule first and said how to do it. So what the conclusions for that report were somewhat inconclusive, and it was time to get our arms around everything that needed to happen at this facility. You have performed work in the intervening years. That's the idea behind these processes. The state wants you to take a look at these things, understand what you need to do, and make some progress. And every 10 years, in theory, the list is supposed to get smaller. Generally, on screen are the bullets that we performed as part of this assessment. It's not elective, it's very prescriptive as issued by the state. So it's a full check. Looking at the physical condition, looking at the water, looking at the soil that is your particular dam, and then giving you a set of recommendations. The documents are provided to the state in what we consider to be the final form. They're reviewed with village officials. Not only do we sign them, but the village is also supposed to sign them, acknowledging that you have actually looked at this document. The state does a better job these days of actually looking at them, reviewing them, and providing their comments back, and more importantly, doing so in a timely fashion so that you can kind of take it all in contemporaneously with when it's originally written. And I think you actually just had a visual inspection by the state up there. So usually the timing of this is all good. If it's at the front of mind, they're willing to keep going through their pile and provide the responses. The way we have arranged the balance of this presentation is essentially in the sequence in which we think you ought to undertake things. It happens to more or less follow the general order of magnitude of cost as well. It does somewhat bury the lead on some of the things that we found, and I'll highlight things, but if you bear with me, I think it'll come together at the end. The first 5 items here are essentially maintenance items. These are things that you can undertake yourselves with the water department. DPW is necessary if you need to supplement, but here just mowing, there's some seepage issues that have always been out there that are well understood. They need to be watched. Just getting vegetation debris, things out of the way that you don't want to become mobilized and wind up somewhere further downstream and or restrict flow and cause something undesirable to happen in the vicinity of the dam. The one item on here, number 1, is, we'll talk a little bit on and off as we go through this evening, but we're requesting that you essentially lower the normal water surface of the reservoir out there for reasons of spillway capacity and understanding what flows this dam can actually handle. One of the items that was done in the time since the first engineering assessment and the second was a good thing, which was you got a very convenient control of the valves on this dam that control its water levels and discharges. There's some paperwork that should be completed with the state, and so we've just tasked the village with the task of finding those papers. Your emergency action plan, this is the document that basically if something is going wrong, how do you respond, is in excellent shape. There was one small document that needed to be appended to it, just to follow the letter of the law. It's a simple thing that the village can add to the document in your annual update that you're already doing. Some of the work that is going to be required out here is going to trigger the requirement for a permit. The state generally allows you to do maintenance without a permit, but when you start touching the ground and modifying the facility itself, they want to see at least a request for a permit. We do believe in this instance, there's a pretty good chance they'll issue what they call a non-jurisdiction determination, which basically says, yep, it's fine, go ahead, thank you. And now to the first one. In red, highlighted here, this is your spillway location for the existing dam. It was originally constructed with about 4 feet between the normal water surface and the earthen top of the embankment. What you see highlighted in red here was constructed at some point by somebody. We don't know when, there doesn't seem to be clear documentation, but it wasn't part of the original design. And what it is doing is overly restricting the flow of the water that can be discharged from the dam, so it should be removed.
I think it was the 1930s, by the way, based
Yep,
on,
so you found a little
well,
document somewhere or some reference.
can't narrow it
but
down more than that.
It's been there a long time. It's not like something that popped up overnight, but it clearly was not included in the original design, and therefore it should be removed. It's a relatively simple task to do, depending on the motivation of the village forces. They could potentially accomplish it with the equipment. Otherwise, it's also a relatively inexpensive item for a contractor to take care of. This is not a large undertaking here.
Why do you think it was built in the 30s? Is there a purpose that it served?
Well, I mean, practically what it's serving is it's overly restricting the flow that is leaving the reservoir, which, from a downstream perspective, you might think is desirable. But what happens is if a large enough storm, say a hurricane, were to come at this, you have a very narrow window for all the water that accumulates in the water body to get out. So what will happen instead is it'll probably rise up and head, and it's not the greatest picture in the world for this, but off to the left, it will go over that grass area. If it's moving with enough speed, start to erode. And that'll scour along the roadway, which is the embankment, which is not a good idea to have it scouring against against the dam itself.
I guess just the reason I was thinking was that they must have built it for a reason. I don't think.
Larry?
I think, well, everything I read,
You surmise.
well, everything I read in the minutes pointed to the fact that they were contemplating raising the height of the spillway because they wanted to raise the height of the water level so they could impound more water, because they were getting concerned about the water level, I mean, not having enough water to provide to the village. So that's documented in a few minutes going back to the 20s and early 30s, so I just don't know when they actually did it.
Was the water being used then to supply the village drinking water?
100%. Like, there was no other source, as far as I could tell. They used to have, I think I said this at a meeting one other time, they used to have, almost at every board meeting, someone would come and report back what the height of the reservoir level was on the water level, because they were so concerned about,
Being too low.
yeah. So anyway, that's where I think it
Obviously,
came
that's
from.
not something we have to worry about now, so that's not an unintended consequence that would be problematic,
Right,
because we don't get our drinking water.
exactly.
And what's being removed is that, call it, looks like top foot and a half there, that is the smaller in width portion, as well as the pipe that runs through it?
So the only thing that we would saw away would be what is highlighted in red there. It's about 3.5 feet tall over the water surface itself.
Much bigger
So
chunk.
it's a big wedge of stone
Okay.
that's been mortared in place there.
I didn't realize that was all the addition, wow.
Have we had a worst-case scenario in the last 90 years where there's been overflow and flooding from a storm?
Not that I'm aware of, no. Not in any of the recent storm, high watermark storms that we've had, going back to 2007, and now I think we have new ones from sometime in the 2010s. I'm sure Mark doesn't want to get into all of the details of the calculations, but you make certain assumptions on what storm you have to use, obviously, so.
Correct.
It doesn't mean that it's actually happened yet.
Right, and generally speaking, these dams are designed to withstand a hurricane. That's, from a practical standpoint, what you should be able to handle. And operationally, the water department is already proactively lowering ahead of storms so that you can essentially act as a shock absorber before things discharge downstream. So those are all good practices, and you're gonna hear that theme come up further as we continue.
And the water's not up against this, or at least most of this, what's being displayed. Removing this relative to where the water is now, what kind of a drop are we looking at, if any?
So removing this right now changes nothing because you're already maintaining it approximately at the water level where it belongs.
Okay.
The negative of this existing in the first place is it introduces an element that requires essentially human intervention. It's not automatic. If we remove this, water will flow using the spillway design that was originally intended. Out there, in the center of the dam is believed to be a core wall. It's shown on one or two of the record documentations. This wall itself is usually either masonry, concrete, or a clay type material, and it reduces seepage. When we model what we saw during our field investigations, it seems to imply that yes, in fact, it is there for it, all good signs. However, the elevation of it relative to the finished grade is not known. So a relatively straightforward investigation is quite literally to dig holes along the crest of the dam to see what we can find. And that should be done to document once and for all, since there is no as-built of that wall, where it lies. It doesn't show terribly well here, but there's a bit of seepage coming out through the dam, not only at the south end of the dam, where there's a bit more grass at the toe, but also along the roadway. Not unsurprising, given that this road is largely constructed on the dam itself. So within the roadway, a recommendation here is to install essentially a French drain or an under drain within the roadway, not within the dam itself, although we're splitting hairs. And that can then connect to the drainage system that is at the top.
So that tow drain is just collecting the water that comes through, or it is eliminating some of it.
So what it's doing is it's essentially bringing the elevation of the water surface within the dam lower. And that's what we want. We would rather have it in a controlled fashion so that it's going to a place where we want and increases the stability of the dam itself. Here on screen happens to be a little low spot in the dam embankment where the crest of the dam is no longer where it was intended to be. Again, the crest of the dam should be about 4 feet above the water surface itself, or vice versa, however you wish to look at it. It is a relatively straightforward exercise, again, to accomplish this. It's probably something that's quite efficient to do in concert with determining the elevation of the core wall within the dam. So you're gonna be disturbing it anyway, you're gonna pull the soil off, you're gonna pull the sod off, excuse me. You can then place fill, roll it, compact it, be done with it.
I think they just did that on my front lawn. Con Ed.
Probably. So the idea is so this is gonna be higher, you're saying?
All we're trying to do is get it to the elevation that you expect it to be at, so you have the storage that you are expected to
But
have
why is it lower than the expected height? Is that because over time it's
Over time.
eroded?
over time.
So there was a
It
point-
has not necessarily eroded, it's probably settled,
But I'm saying there was a point in time when it was higher.
maybe. The,
We have no way
we're
of
talking
knowing.
we're talking about several inches, here, so it's not unreasonable, and it's probably more likely that over time, things have just consolidated and sunk slightly in
So
that area.
for it to be the highest safety level, to make sure we can contain what we want to contain, you want to raise it
You
up.
wanna get it back to where it belongs.
Can I ask where the measurement of 291.5 feet is measured from?
It is a particular datum that the original design drawings were designed in. So it is somewhat arbitrary, it's not actually stated on the documents themselves, but someone decided 0 was somewhere and went 291.5 feet above it.
So that's not sea level?
It
Could be.
could be, I didn't cross-reference that, but
Right, yeah, no.
it does not, these elevations do not happen to be what is considered a modern datum today. It does not matter. But if you were to look at that relative to the survey that were performed out here, you get two different
That's what we're
numbers.
trying to do. Thank you.
So one thing here that we would recommend doing is determining what storms, when, require a water elevation to what level, until the additions to the spillway can be removed. After that, quite frankly, it'll probably be useful as well, once you have that spillway, to understand how those water levels can be controlled. Because, as we'll come to later on, the storm that is tributary or the storm that can occur on the watershed that is tributary to your reservoir will, in that hurricane type of example, will exceed what this current spillway, whether it's modified or not, in both cases, would be able to handle. So getting an understanding of what happens when it rains, for a weather forecast of 7 inches in 24 hours or 15 inches in 3 days or what have you. We can give you recommendations that your water department can use so that when they hear a weather report, they know which buttons to push to what levels.
They're already making adjustments, but we're talking about doing it on a more official.
Yes.
With actual calculations, yeah. We're not doing it that way right now.
As opposed
But
to.
there's no, 14 and 15 don't include any new equipment or construction, it's just testing.
Your work is all your equipment is there and in place. It's basically an owner's manual to say, if you see this in a weather report, put it to this level, you can expect this to happen to the
How
turbine.
exactly do you test that without a storm?
There's quite a bit of published documentation and data out there that we utilize and put into the models that we've already prepared for this analysis. Essentially what we're doing is instead of taking a lot of these synthetic storms, we put real data into it and respond.
Oh, so they're not actually gonna change the water level as part of this, this is just this is all on paper or computers?
We will use use computers to come up with the recommendations for the elevations for the water department to actually implement.
But they're not gonna do that today, or the day they're testing, they're doing this, in other words, it would only be put into place if there was an actual storm.
Correct.
Gotcha, okay, I misunderstood. In my reading this at home, I thought it was like a testing procedure, like they go up there and they say like, let's see what this is, let's see what.
Yeah, I mean, in reality, if the weather report says it's 6 inches and we tell them bring it down 3 feet, you're gonna get a sense of, how good either the weatherman or we are. But, it's,
And presumably this presupposes that you have enough advance warning of the extent of the rain. Because these dump in the spillway, that's a question.
where do they discharge?
Yeah.
We're coming to that. They do not discharge the spillway, they discharge beyond the tow, beyond the roadway.
Okay,
On the other side of the road.
all right, I'm looking forward to that.
Maybe not.
I wonder why, John.
By the way, it's property we don't own, in case you're
Yeah.
wondering, but,
Well, I do live between the two dams, so I'm keenly interested in it.
yeah, no, I don't,
I'm up
I
on
think
it.
you're out of the,
Yeah.
you're out of the way.
And, yes.
Right on cue.
The dam has a spillway, which is essentially that automatic overflow, if you will, at the north end or the top of the picture here. The direction of flow is shown by the blue arrow as it zigzags through private property, ultimately then heading westward toward the Hudson River. The dam itself is running essentially top to bottom. The reservoir is in the darker color there, and the gatehouse, if you can make it out, is just a bit below the middle of the graphic there that you can see from the roadway below. So below that structure, way down at the base of the dam, are a series of pipes, and they discharge underneath the roadway, turn, and then disappear and discharge somewhere in the phragmites that are shown in the photograph up in the upper corner of the slide. Right now, the water department knows that if they open the valves, water bubbles up in there, but it's very difficult to get into that area. So one task is to cut down the vegetation and locate it. And once we have that, then it is a matter of essentially completing the documentation and frankly having the right to discharge at that location and getting the water back to the water course rather than pumping into that particular location. So we believe there's a distance that needs to be covered. We think the pipe ends somewhere in the marsh and it needs to get to the water course from there. So we can do it in a variety of ways, whether it be by grading the land, extending pipes, rerouting pipes so they don't occupy as much property. There's a number of ways to do it, but it needs some thought and it needs to ultimately be resolved.
Is the red the thing that's in place or the blue is the thing that's in place?
So the blue is the water course itself discharging from the spillway. The red is approximately the extent of your outlet now, and we need to get the red to connect to the blue.
And that's private property, as I mentioned.
It is.
So when you do make that connection, then it gets to the point where I thought it might have been at the outset, which is you need enough advance notice, because otherwise you're dumping water into the spillway. At the same time, the reservoir itself is dumping into the spillway, and you're just gonna overtop the spillway.
And the beauty of the system that you have involved now, that was installed several years ago, is you've got 3 separate valves at 3 different elevations within the water body, all of which the percent that they can be open can be controlled as well. So it's not just off on, it's half open too.
Yeah.
So you have quite a bit of flexibility and control so that you're able to regulate that. So if you do see that too much flow is rising downstream, it's quick with a radio, throttle it back
Yeah.
and keep it under control. All right, so this is what I alluded to at the beginning. These are the big ticket items, as it were, and the punchline of this engineering assessment is there are 2 things. The embankment itself is on the border of the factors of safety that we like to see for a dam embankment itself, and the spillway itself, currently is essentially blocked by that mortared stone in place, but even after we remove it, there still isn't enough capacity to move that hurricane through. Some of which is because of the downstream piping that's passing underneath the roadway and then cutting through people's properties, but there's a way around all this. It's just a matter of figuring out how to balance the water levels, the geometry of the receiving water receiving water body, and the shape of what it is that we choose to discharge. So in all likelihood, a recommendation to address all of this will jockey a lot of those factors. The fact that you are not drinking out of the water body now is a very good thing.
That was my question.
If you were,
Does any of this have
if you
to
were
do-
selling water, you would want to keep as much water as possible. And since you are not, you have the ability to bring those things down.
And does any of this have to do with any requirements that we might have for the potential of our water being potable and used at some point, or we have no obligations or requirements to do maintenance in that way?
So as far as I know, and I don't know whether you've reviewed any of this, but as far as I know, our obligations are governed by the water supply agreement that we've signed with the City of New York. And in that agreement, and I can't quote it for you, and we could certainly, respond back with the information, but I believe in there it points to the reservoir as a backup water supply. But that water supply agreement was from 2001. It was before any of these engineering assessments were done. It probably was a carryover from the 1960 water supply agreement that we can't even find, frankly. In terms of finding that document, we know it exists, but we don't have it. So it probably was a carryover from those days. Going forward, I mean, if there's any discussion about doing anything to this reservoir and this dam that would impact the ability for it to be a backup water supply, I would think that would trigger a negotiation with the City of New York. I'm sure we can figure that out. Because realistically, it's never going to be a potable water supply unless you have proper filtration. I don't even know all the requirements. I don't even want to think about it. But anyway, it would be a much larger issue, but I don't think it's insurmountable, just my sense of it anyway.
Right. But again, we don't have to make financial decisions now based on what we perceive might be an agreement that's in place from 25 years ago, 20 years ago.
Or put differently.
Well, these are,
As maybe this is hypothetical, but might help, if we decide we want to drop the water way, way down, so we don't have to do a very expensive project, if we can find a way to do that, can New York City stand in the way? Is that sort of what you're asking?
I mean, my recollection of the language in that water supply agreement is that it has to be maintained as a backup water supply, so doing what you said sounds like.
You'll have to find out.
Well, yeah, exactly. So, but I just don't think that that's insurmountable because it's very unrealistic, and I really do believe it's left over from days gone by, where now we have multiple sources of water, both through the Catskill Aqueduct and the Delaware Aqueduct. And we even could have implemented an interconnection with the village of Tarrytown if we had to. So there's multiple backups that would come before any drastic use of the reservoir. It really would have to be Armageddon.
And from a practical standpoint, you're right, it's a box that needs to be checked in that process before you essentially agree to say, yes, for example, let's take it down 10 feet permanently. Because those obligations, from your water supply agreements, if you have multiple agreements and multiple ways to get water, it may be sufficient to satisfy the county health department that you have the ability to continue to serve under your obligations through those purchase agreements. But when you have these massive DEP projects that take whole sections of aqueducts offline, now that you have the ability to get from either one, it's unlikely they would take both of them out. Whole sections of Westchester County would have no water as a result. So it's convoluted, but it does have to be documented as part of that process before it goes away. Let's see. So those are really the two items. The stability of this embankment. Can it be reinforced? Can it be grouted? Does it need something driven into it to stabilize it? does the investigation done earlier remove enough of the variables that say, you know what, with more data, turns out it's actually okay. That's a possibility too. You know, this is the last step in the last slide, not because it's trying to hit you over the head on the way out the door, but it is the one that there's a lot of things that have to come before this until you actually get to this point for it. You know, at some point, plan specifications, there is quite a bit of permitting. If we do hypothetically remove some water from it, there's even more permitting to go with it, just because of the relatively permanent water surface that you have out there. But it's a process for it, and it's one that doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's very much as open as this board wishes to make it, or any subsequent board, plus the whole secret process and the document review with the state through the permit process. Eventually it leads to construction. As was alluded before, if it goes this way, it will not be cheap for it. The nice thing that seems to be happening in current climate that has not been there for dam owners in the past 10 years is there's finally funding out there for high hazard dam owners. So if you're a low hazard dam owner, doesn't apply to this village, you're pretty much out of luck and you're still on your own dime. But here there's programs with FEMA, and even the governor has finally gotten around to talking about it with the Environmental Bond Act.
So we're so lucky that we
You beat me to it, Larry.
I remember we thought we weren't lucky when they
Yeah, right.
high damage down.
Right, right.
I think that's it.
Yep, that is.
Some questions. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it, and particularly you're dealing with some of our rather basic questions. So what's next, I guess, would be the.
Well, from our standpoint, we're gonna need to sit down and really realistically decide how much of the current 2024 work can legitimately get done in 2024 within our budget. So that's part of what we've got to really figure out. I think we have some budget numbers that have been given to us. We just have to kind of slide things around and see how they can fit. I mean, it's not going to be an operating budget, and you know, to some extent, I think we have to talk a little bit. This is more of an internal discussion. We have to talk exactly. We have to talk a little bit about how we want to treat the funding of this type of work going forward, because traditionally it's been funded by the water ratepayers through the water fund and through their water bill. It hasn't been funded by taxes. At what point does this become so big that it's completely unrealistic to think that water rates are going to support this type of work? I mean, and it's not, it's traditionally a water facility, and we're managing it like a water facility, but is it truly a water facility anymore? I mean, so we have to kind of have that philosophical discussion about how to actually fund things as we go forward.
I mean, this is just personal opinion, but there's probably some mix.
Right,
It's infrastructure also,
right.
and safety and.
Yeah, I mean, we're using it for flood
Shed.
control, you know, I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of our major uses right now.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
Are the immediate issues, which are in the first part, 1 through 5 or 1 through 6 or whatever, solely budgetary, or is it also workload and I think it's the ability of our staff to get that work done?
no, I mean, I don't think the spillway work is that intensive a job that we can't fit it into our matrix of projects that you hear about all the time. So no, I think that's something we can do. And we have a contractor for that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mark, thanks.
Sally, I
Appreciate it.
There you go, thank you very much.
Good night.
Okay, next up is discussion of conservation efforts for the Irvington Woods. First, I'm gonna digress. I've been trying to watch the basketball playoffs as a diversion. And there was a point in time when someone was revisiting when the Milwaukee Bucks had eligibility, and they showed a T-shirt that is bright green with a fearsome buck on it that says "Fear the Deer." And I thought, I can't get away from this issue no matter where I go. So what I would like to do, if the rest of the board will permit me, is sort of summarize the calls that we've had and who we talked to, just more for the record than it is for you folks, because I know you've seen the summaries. I'll try to do it under 10 minutes. And then you can correct me if you think I've not captured them, because what I tried to do literally is get 5 single-spaced pages into 10 bullet points, and you'll tell me if I did it well or didn't. And then there's 2 quick things I'd cover after that, because they came after those calls. One is my interactions with CJ, and another is a letter that we got from PETA. And again, I'll summarize those. So first thing.
Can I just take 1 second?
Of course.
To thank the board for holding off until I got back from being away to have this discussion. I know the board took a little heat from the public that felt that perhaps we weren't moving quickly enough, and for that end of it, I do appreciate that everyone waited to do this.
Well, glad you're back to participate. Thank you. So the people we spoke to are, I'll lead with that. Ann Swaim, who's the executive director of the Sawmill River. Oh, the way we did the calls is I was on, I think there were 8 or 9 of them, on every one, and then with one exception, there was also another trustee on, and it was sort of a random selection based on people's schedule. The one exception was when we spoke with the person who operates a drone, and I'll get to that in a minute. Larry was the other person on. So we spoke to Ann Swaim, who is the executive director of Sawmill River Audubon. Danielle Bagley Miller, who until recently was the director of science and stewardship at Teatown Lake Reservation, and is now a consultant. And those 2 people have run deer management programs. Michael Coyne, who's the thermal drone operator that I just described, is also a Scarsdale law enforcement officer. Kristen Rickman, who is the emergency response division manager of PETA. Dan Atchison, who's senior curator of wildlife for Westchester County Conservation Division. Again, somebody who's had responsibility for trying to manage the impact of deer. John Ziegler, who's the manager of the Thane Family Forest in the New York Botanical Gardens, and also an Irvington resident. He did not speak about deer management, he spoke more about impact on the forest. Kent Webb, who is a professor in business school at San Jose State, but was highly relevant because he maintains it's called deerfriendly.com website, and also had been integrally involved in a sterilization program that was done out there, sterilization of deer. Chris Nagy, Director of Research and Education at Mianus River Gorge Preserve in Bedford, New York. Again, somebody who had managed a deer management program. And our conversations, as you'll hear, were not just about the deer management, it's also about vegetation, and are there other possible explanations for what's going on in the woods, and how would you measure if you did some sort of a deer program. Oswald Schmitz, who's the Ostler Professor of Population and Community Ecology at Yale University. Also someone who's been involved in sort of studying the impact of deer on the natural habitat. So those are the people we spoke to. Now I'm going to try, well, it's not going to be easy to sort of summarize what I think everybody said. Excuse me. Everyone, and I'm going to use deer management as a euphemism for the deer management program, I'm going to call it bow hunting. Everyone for or against bow hunting seem to agree that there's a problem with forest regeneration and undergrowth. Most agree that beech leaf disease will exacerbate the problem in the next 7 to 10 years. That is because the beech trees will die. Everyone for or against bow hunting seems to agree that fences, contraception, and relocation do not work due to the expense and need for constant maintenance sterilization, which may have certain long-term economic efficiencies relative to bow hunting, doesn't appear to be available in New York State without a complementary hunting program. Now, I admit that's subject to further investigation, but from the internet review that I did, that's what I found.
It depends what you mean by fencing, because Chris Nagy said they actively do their exposures and he would teach us how to do it. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, that's why I said due to the expense and need for constant maintenance, but that's fair. Yes, you could do a fence program that would keep all the deer out, but it would be.
No, not all the deer out.
Yeah. If you want, I'll address that point. You should let me finish.
I'm sorry.
But I can address that point,
No, that's fine.
which is what Chris said was put the fence in and then move it every, let's say, 7 or 10 years. You'll get the browsing up, but you will lose all the undergrowth on the ground. So that's why I didn't try to go beyond what I described. Let me finish. Take notes if you can. If you have to, you can jump in again. It's okay. Most everyone agrees that deer impact on the forest and deer management is a regional problem, i.e. the solution is better done in concert with nearby communities. Most everyone agreed that a measurement of success, that is forest regeneration, must be established before commencing the program, and that we need to rule out the invasive Asian jumping earthworm having an impact on the forest. That is a sort of a dominant impact since it takes the nutrients out of the forest and can affect regrowth. Most everyone agreed that it's important to have an accurate deer census at the start of any deer control program. Those favoring bow hunting agree that if bow hunting of deer is employed, other complementary approaches need to be used as well, like exclosures and forestry, i.e. opening of canopy and planting. Ironically, this is editorialization, but ironically, the beech leaf disease may create the opening of canopies. Those favoring bow hunting agree that even if deer numbers are reduced, noticeable forest regeneration will take several years. And I will get to the against bow hunting in a second. Among those favoring bow hunting, everyone has kept open their parks, everyone posted rules, everyone approved hunters based on skill, equipment, and ability to deal with the public. Most employed volunteer hunters for economic efficiency, with the exception of those who had hunters on staff. Some used volunteer dogs to track any deer that after being hit by an arrow ran off. None experienced the non-hunter encountering a dead or dying deer. Among those against bow hunting, they noted that the closed canopy may promote lack of biodiversity to begin with, and that bow hunting may result in up to 50% of wounded deer moving before dying. When those favoring bow hunting were asked what they would do if they could not use bow hunting, they replied, forest thinning, exclusion through fences or branch walls, and rotating the fenced area when tree growth above browsing height when trees grow above browsing height, and as well as active tree planting. They noted that the deer would still eliminate ground vegetation and trees not above browsing level once the fences are moved, and that it's a very labor-intensive approach. So that was sort of my summary of the calls. Let me just add CJ and the PETA folks in, and then I'll turn it over to anybody else who has comments. I spent an hour with CJ wandering the woods, and there are some existing exclosures. Some are in the nature center, so they're not suitable for monitoring reforestation no matter what we do. There's one exclosure, and I say that because it's been planted, heavily planted, the ones that if you see right around the nature center. There is one exclosure started around 2013 that's perhaps 50 by 50 meters, and 2 or more on the borders of the woods that might be suitable for comparisons. There are also marked plots in which beech leaf disease is being measured. They are collecting photographic evidence to show changes. Ideally, if we were trying to measure reforestation, we would mark plots without fencing to see if deer reduction allows the vegetation to return. They could be relatively small, would need to be areas that are not the subject of planting of new trees. Currently, in many unfenced areas of the woods, you can see seedlings a few inches high, but they don't get the chance to grow past browsing height. There are mature trees and seedlings, but very few juvenile trees. So it's as if a generation has been skipped. I asked CJ to do, and I sent this email around today, to give me some evidence of the presence of whether this Asian jumping earthworm is there. And there is some evidence of that. They, as I mentioned before, the jumping worms feast on mulch and strip vital nutrients from topsoil. which can kill plants and increase erosion. At the moment, it is in limited areas and has had a small impact. In fact, where CJ was able to produce these mustard tests, somehow the worms don't like mustard, they come to the surface. There are saplings and seedlings present in that area, so it hasn't become, at this point, overwhelming. Let me jump to PETA, which I'm gonna have to summarize, because I just have the letter here. And I've had a couple of follow-ups. This is, again, with Kristen Rickman. Thank you for the recent discussion regarding managing biodiversity ground levels in Irvington Woods. As discussed in the meeting, loss of biodiversity is natural as forests age, and deer are common scapegoats. Forests are dynamic, and expecting to see the state forest that was documented 100 or even 30 years ago is unreasonable. As are any statements indicating that taking no action will result in the death of the forest. She also raises the question of, since deer were, in a sense, extirpated at a point in time, we don't really know what a natural forest might look like. She also points out that since you can't, and these are my words, but it is summarizing what you said, since you cannot eliminate the food source, even eliminating some of the deer, they will return to the existing food source, and they may, well, she says they will simply breed at an accelerated rate in response to the increase in available food supply. She recommends, among other things, and she's also making an introduction for me to somebody else who does some of this stuff, but basically tree shelters and cages, which I think we've been talking about, as fencing. And we actually are doing this in the woods. You see those little plastic tubes around the saplings. Let's see. As well as, let's see, forestry techniques, where she talks about, openings in the canopy as trees grow. You need to make openings in the canopies as trees grow larger, and discusses a range of forestry techniques. And then I think, as I mentioned a moment ago, she's introducing me to somebody who's not available this week, but who sort of has I'll call it a deer-friendly deer management framework. So I will talk to that person, and people are welcome to join me on that, just to get a little bit more feedback there. So that's my summary. The way, this doesn't have to go the way I want it to go, so let me just tell you what my thinking was. It would be nice to hear from each person sort of first you could react to what I said. Second, just to get your rough take on where you want this to go. And if need be, I can give you a target, meaning, okay, we're gonna put in a deer management program. Would you, a bow hunting program, very specific. Would you do that or would you not do that? And if people aren't ready to talk about that, they can say that too. Because at some point we have to make a decision one way or another what we're gonna do about it. Otherwise, this will be on the agenda for the rest of our careers here. So let me stop talking and let anybody else. Mitch, I know you had comments that you
No, there are a few things up there, but I wasn't gonna make any other comments.
Okay. Anybody else?
I mean, about what you said.
I get it. I hear you. Yeah, I'm making no assumptions about anybody's position here. Maybe I'll go first. It's not an easy decision, as everybody knows here. And I'm not necessarily swayed by getting lots of letters from people telling me to do something, because that doesn't always mean it's right. And the reason it's not such an easy decision, if it was just deer and just forest, and you could see that the deer are the only factor in the reduction in the forest, that'd make it really easy. You gotta do something about the deer, one way or another, and if bow hunting's the most effective, and I don't think we can use riflery under the circumstances, even if we did get a letter from either the Humane Society or PETA suggesting that would be a way to go, because it would be more humane. You're near the highway. That isn't gonna happen. So the other factors that you have to deal with are, is it the canopy? and we're gonna find out pretty quickly because we're starting to lose trees. And could it be the Asian jumping worms? My initial take on both of those is that's probably not the case, because when you walk through the woods, and I encourage any of you who want to walk through with CJ, you can see that there is growth at this level, and if I were standing up, at I'm tall enough that from shoulder up, the deer cannot browse on that, and everything else in between is gone. And if it was the earthworms, you wouldn't get that initial growth on the bottom. And if it was the canopy, you also probably wouldn't get you wouldn't get the early growth and the 6-foot growth. That would be a rather odd combination. So, I guess, I'm not thrilled getting to this position, but my inclination is to try some sort of a bow hunting program for a year or two, and to see what happens with it. I recognize that doesn't address the morality of it, which I find particularly disturbing, but I also recognize that there's a flip side to that morality, and that is that if you do nothing, you are making a decision about what animals will not continue, whether it's birds or small mammals or reptiles. So, and having said all that, I'm still going to talk to the PETA person if there is if somebody comes up with something better. I'm prepared to listen. Now, all of you were on various calls, so if you want to say something about the call that you were on, go ahead.
I mean, I think I shared this, before, I think, I was somebody who was like very, very involved with PETA in high school, and I think, if you ever asked me that I would feel comfortable considering this, I think I would probably not have thought that this is something that I would be comfortable considering. I think what makes this difficult is that, there are all these factors. I think in talking to the different people, what was clear, when we talked a little bit about this, John, that everyone's not measuring the same thing. So it's kind of hard, that makes it a little bit difficult to sort of, have that like certainty about it. So a lot of this to me is a little bit of a leap of faith, and a little bit of like looking at everything and then kind of, coming, for me at least, coming to this conclusion that I have to get comfortable with either that doing nothing is also a choice, right? I think maybe I've seen enough to know that doing nothing is also a choice, and that I'm not comfortable doing that either, right? That I think it makes sense to try this, think about how we're going to measure what this looks like for us, what an outcome looks like, right? And I think it's difficult because I think, at least from listening to what I've listened to, unless there's some measure of other people also doing this, right? We may not have success. That's a potential outcome as well, right? We may not have success because maybe Irvington doing it alone is not sufficient.
Can I tell you one thing about that? And you're gonna have to confirm my accuracy. Dobbs Ferry I'm not saying they're gonna do it, but they have reached out at least to ask about it. Am I correct? Or
They want to talk, yeah.
they wanna
Yeah.
talk about it?
But I don't know that that's a full board.
Yeah, no, I
I'm
get it.
Speaking for their entire
I
board.
get it, I understand that.
Yeah. So I think it's not an easy decision. I think it's a difficult decision, but I think it's also, for me, a responsible decision about the totality of the circumstances, right? And if we're going to be, stewards of that forest, and if we want to have that forest going forward, and if we want to think of the animals and all the vegetation, that we're in a really tough place, unfortunately. And I think what became very clear to me from those calls is this is not a one thing, one solution thing, right? Like this is going to be a combination of many factors. So this is like one piece of it, but it's not all of the pieces, right? Just like I think, fencing probably would not be sufficient either. You'd have to, I assume, do a combination of other things, but I've gotten myself fairly comfortable with it. I don't love the idea, but I think, I think it's a responsible thing.
It's interesting because it is a personal decision for every one of us that none of us finds comfortable.
Yeah.
But if we were in upstate New York, or in Vermont, it's kind of commonplace. Now, they don't have the same pressures, it's not a sort of a residential neighborhood. And it's sort of doubly odd for me because I'm also a vegan. It's not entirely a moral decision on my part, but it does make me think twice about taking a life. Anyway, go ahead.
So touching on some of the stuff that Irene brought up, I think, we have to make sure if some of this we're measuring the right things, and that's, it sounds like CJ's already thinking about this, but I think that was something that came up in, the calls I was on with you, John, like from, Danielle Miller from T-Town and also from Dr. Ashwood Smith from Yale, was that we want to measure that this does have an effect what we're going to see, and I think what we want to see is not reduced deer, we want to see increased forest growth, and we have to be in a position to measure, get the baseline, measure that, have a plan to measure over time to see if it's happening. I mean, it sounded like what they call with T-Town that it's unlikely to see real results in less than 2 years. But again, I think we need to have a plan for managing it. That was the other thing too, is it doesn't sound like it's just we hire a bull hunter and we're done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of management around it to make sure that we're tracking the right things. Someone has to take that on and do that. And even the hunters, T-Town had a full-time PhD expert managing their deer management program, right? As a major part of the job, vetting hunters and making sure everything was run correctly and dealing with issues that came up. And so I think there is I think we have to have a real plan for that rather than just, we can't just say, let's just go and not have a plan for the tracking and the management of it.
If we do this, I would charge the Woods Committee and CJ with establishing methods of measuring the reforestation, educating the public. We gotta have, the village will be responsible for this as well, but basically safety, posting signs in the woods, counting the deer, which we can do up front with the thermal drone and then repeat it with the thermal drone and cameras. So you're absolutely right. I would not, even if we decided right now we're gonna do this, it would be subject to all of those things being, a package being delivered back to us that says, here's how it's gonna happen. Here is how we're gonna measure success, because if we're not getting success, we're not doing this. Anybody else wanna say something?
You gonna say something?
Well, I'm gonna say something, but I'm giving you the opportunity.
I'd rather you go first.
Okay, sure. I was not on any of the calls, but I did read through all of the reports of the calls, and I did give a fairly large list of questions, most of which were
incorporated as
answered.
best we could,
And most of which were answered. I think what I've heard from, particularly from everyone actually who's spoken so far, holds true. I think that the deer issue is not the only issue. I think there needs to be additional follow-up, particularly in terms of measurement. I think that a lot of the additional work that was suggested that has to be done in addition to deer management is either gonna happen because of the beech tree disease, which is gonna open up our canopy, or is already happening in terms of barberry removal and programs which we already have in effect. And that the one program that we don't have in effect is the deer management aspect of this. I think it's a responsible way to handle this issue. I think the technique that the Woods Committee has particularly recommended in terms of using a single hunter who evidently comes highly recommended by a number of the people we spoke with as a responsible hunter, as someone who is not going to be leaving deer with arrows in them wandering off
That's not true.
to die, but is going to be responsible for taking care of the deer which are killed, is not going to be baiting the deer to come in any way by leaving out salt licks for them to come, innocently to eat and then to be doing, to be killing them. However, I think that expecting to have results in 1 or 2 years is probably not realistic. I think we have to make this decision. We can do it in a short period, for a contract perhaps over 2 years. But I think as a board, we have to recognize that this is a multi-year issue, that, as Larry said, we're not gonna see results right away. Well, we're gonna have a measurement system that will look at forest regrowth, and forest regrowth seems to be what everyone is saying is the way to measure success, not to count who's being killed or whatever, but to be able to monitor that. But you're not gonna see that in a year, and you're not gonna see that probably in 2 years. So we have to be realistic with the understanding. That's one of the reasons why this becomes an issue that is, in my mind, financially responsible, as opposed to talking about a large fencing, project that's gonna cost a significant more amount of money than even a 5-year contract with Kelly. So my feeling is at this point that we need to make a decision. I think something that hasn't been brought up here is that the hunting can only be done in a certain permitted time frame. So I know we got a lot of letters telling us we need to act very quickly. And I don't agree that we need to act very quickly, but I think that we need to act in a time frame that will allow the hunter to be permitted for the hunting period, which I believe runs somewhere between October and December, or with a month on either side as a special extension. But it needs to, we can't say, let's put it off and let's make a decision in November, because then we're waiting a whole year before he'd be permitted to be able to do that again. So I'm not trying to rush the issue, but I am letting us know that there is some time constraint.
Two things, and then Mitch, the floor is yours, that are somewhat relevant. One, where we cannot automatically assume, until Larry does a little research, that it's Peter Kelly, I think was the name of the hunter, that would be the person who does it, because we need to know whether we have to bid this out, or can be treated as a professional service or something of that sort. So we didn't do the research on that. Larry just explained it to me because I wanted to hear where people are. The second thing is, as far as deer wandering off, it was mentioned to us that a deer hit with an arrow wandering off, that there is a volunteer service of dogs that will track the deer so that you do not have a deer wandering off.
Can I just comment?
Yeah,
And
and
I
the
know
deer isn't unfound. The dogs find the deer so that you can't say we don't know where the deer went. But the deer are gonna go away from where the hunter is.
Yes, I'm sorry,
And it
I
can
wasn't
take hours for
implying.
them to die from bleeding out, so.
I can't speak to the science of that, but I will stipulate that for this discussion, that the deer don't die instantly. Some may, but that there are many that don't. My only point was, there will not, it's number one, it's the impression I got was it's very rare without dogs for a hunter not to find the deer once it's been hit with an arrow. But if we decide that's an issue, you have a volunteer service should we decide to call upon it. That's the only point I was
In
making.
the call that we had for the Audubon Society, she said there were no instances of that, right? They've been having
There's
that.
two different issues. Chris said that they've never had a deer that they lost that someone just came across.
Right.
But he said it is normal, they can't get it every single time for the deer to wander off. They are found eventually, but they wander
That's
off
not,
for a long time, that's what
in the
Chris said.
Audubon Society was not, that's not.
Right, I would say that in
Chris is
general,
in favor of deer killing, he
But no,
kills
I
deer.
understand, but is it in the same, is that the same spot? Is it's not necessarily the same place.
Two different places.
Correct. I'm
But
just
I
saying
think we
different
were talking
experiences.
about a situation where there were multiple hunters. So not just a single person
Correct.
that we're talking about. This is where there were volunteer hunters who were trained and authorized to go out, but it's multiple people. And that's where you can lose something or lose someone or need a dog to be able to trace a
But
deer.
the issue isn't losing them, all right, whatever.
Yeah, well, so I think let me just say one thing. You're all right in the sense that I think, Mitch, you're saying if a deer is hit by an arrow, it can wander off. Agreed.
Of course it'll be down, that's not my issue.
Okay, fine. But what we heard from everybody who made this comment, and I think there were 3, maybe 4 people who said this, that they never didn't find it, and no one who was a non-hunter ever encountered.
Right, I'm concerned more about what we're doing to the deer.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Okay, I got it. Thank you. Anyway, sorry.
I mean, I don't even know why I'm talking, because obviously, the decision's been made, but I just feel like I should put on the record how I feel about this, because I think this is morally reprehensible, fiscally irresponsible, and misguided. I have a lot of notes, so bear with me. We're being asked to use taxpayer money to kill 200-pound mammals in a particularly brutal way. Both those who oversee the deer killing programs and those who oppose such programs reported that it's not uncommon for the arrow not to kill the deer immediately. So the deer runs off with an arrow in her body, bleeding out, and death can take hours. It's amazing that people are calling this humane, because there's nothing humane about this. You may decide it's the thing that we should do, but to call it humane is just self-delusion. And the argument, I had this prepared before, I'm not picking up
That's okay.
about this. Well, there's a moral balance here, because there might be a place that frogs can't live. I am sorry, no one's talking about going into the woods and shooting frogs with arrows, right? A decreased habitat means that they won't breed, they won't come to exist, they won't find a place to lay their eggs. That is very different than and these are small animals, than going in and brutally killing 200-pound mammals. It's a completely different thing, it's apples and oranges. One does not justify the other. Fiscally, Dan Atchison, who oversees the deer killing program for the county, said that to John and me, that the thing we have to understand is that this is not a 1-year deal or a 5-year deal. Once you start killing the deer, you have to do it forever. It's in perpetuity. If you stop, then it has stopped having the effect. So this is a perpetual, ever-increasing cost in the village's budget. That's something we have to accept. On top of that, he said that it's only the first step. He said, I can go out and kill all the deer I can kill, and it's not going to solve the problem. And there are all these other things that we're agreeing to do as well if we do this. So this is a huge financial undertaking we're making, and I don't think people are talking about that enough at all. And the whole idea of doing it for 2 years is one thing I do agree with Larry Lonke on, is it's ridiculous, because on both ends, first of all, both of them said that at first you get a certain level of success, but then the deer adapt and it becomes much harder to manage the population for different reasons. So after 2 years, we're not going to know what the long-term effect is. And it's also on the flip side, if we're going to have to do it forever anyway, what's the sense in doing it for 2 years if it's not going to do any good when the people who are in favor, the ones who kill the deer, I'm not talking about PETA here, I'm talking about the people who are in charge of killing the deer, say it's something that has to be done every year in perpetuity. So I think it's fiscally irresponsible in that regard. From a practical standpoint, look, I understand you guys are saying, well, I never thought I'd support this, but here it is, it's something that I think we have to do. I look at this and I think that it's very unlikely that this is going to succeed for several reasons. The biggest one is something that, again, I'm going back to what the deer killer said, not what PETA said. Said that the biggest problem is that this parcel, the Irvington Woods, we don't control the area in which the deer live. Chris Nagy said that it is highly unlikely that the range of the deer that we're seeing in the woods is the woods. And it's much more likely that their range extends beyond the woods outside of our control. And both Atchison and Nagy both said that without a regional management plan, this is not a particularly effective way to address this, because the deer will just keep coming in from other places. Let me get back to my notes because I'm losing my place for a second. So it's important to know here, we have one 250-acre plot of land that's part of a way longer thing going north and south, which is different than every single person that consulted with the woods and that we spoke to, who control gigantic. Chris Nagy's was 750 acres, it's actually 920, but the one main plot was 750. So we don't control the area that needs to be addressed for this. So what Chris said was, and this is a quote, "We would probably have a really good first few years," but he said after that, the deer will figure things out and come back at night. And that was a quote again, it's a tough one. You need a coordinated regional plan because everyone manages their own, he used some of the word, but he meant properties. The deer just move and come back. And he said that in a parcel as small as the woods, deer can easily do that. They can come in and out. So, and Atchison also said about the regional approach. This isn't just one guy that was saying it. He said they had that same problem in theirs and they had to try to ignite hunts to keep them out, but even that was problematic. So without going into a much larger thing with Dobbs, Hastings, Tarrytown, and maybe even more areas, this is a completely symbolic gesture. Oh, we're trying something, but we don't control the area that we need to control if we're actually going to do this. Also, Nagy said that, that they have not had regeneration of tall trees. His exact quote was, "It's certainly not what we might have hoped for." And he literally said to John and I that they are going through the process of deciding whether it's failed as far as the tall trees go, or whether it's taking more, it's a long time. And he just had a chuckle, and he said, "We've decided to go with it's gonna take a long time for now." He was acknowledging that it may not be true, that it may be that it's not working, and they're not gonna get the tall trees back like they wanted. So this is not a panacea. This is not something that is definitely going to work. And again, this isn't, his area is 750 acres that he controls the entire thing, and they're not able to do it, as opposed to 250 acres in the middle of a gigantic wooded area. We talked about the exposures. He was very positive about it. He said they move them around every 7 to 10 years. What John said is completely true. It doesn't get the below level ones, but it gets them up to the higher level ones. He said they have ways to get them up quickly. He said he would advise the village on how to do that. He wasn't like, "Oh, well, I guess you can do this." He was very, very high on the exposures. He said they're built in a certain way that they allow small animals and their predators in underneath. And he said, "I'll help you if you ever need it. I have experience setting them up quickly and effectively." That's what he said. There's also a lot of evidence that killing the deer has not over time significantly decreased the population, because as John said, someone said, as long as there's food, there's always going to be deer coming back, and that ties in with us not controlling the whole area anyway. So that's a major problem. And also the other factors which have been discussed, so I'm not going to go into that. And the one thing I want to mention, because it came up so much from the discussions, when people are saying, "You need to do this because there are deer in people's yards, and I don't want the deer in my backyard." I want to make it clear this would do nothing to address that. And the reason I can say that so clearly is because the proposal can't have it both ways. So if the deer are not going to come into the woods and killing them is going to actually lower the numbers, then they're not going to leave from in front of people's houses, right? So if they are going to leave from in front of people's houses, then there's no reason to be killing the deer because it's not going to lessen the population in the woods. So there's no scenario under which people are going to have fewer deer in their houses, by their houses, if we undertake this. And if it does happen, it means that it's not working in the woods because they're filling in where they were.
Put differently, you're suggesting that that the deer, much like the nocturnal hunting that you described, the deer will be driven to residential neighborhoods from the woods.
What I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying is people said that there are deer in front of my house, so please do this. And we're not going to be shooting deer in people's houses. We're going to be shooting deer in the
Well,
woods.
they don't live in front of people's houses.
Well, people came in here, there were multiple people, multiple letters that said, I look out, the woman said, my daughter's first word was deer, we used to love them, but then they destroyed our property or whatever.
They might, they move, I think they're saying they move in and out, but they don't, I think they say
They probably have a mile range.
There were multiple people complaining about the deer in their yards, and I'm saying this will not address that.
I don't think we're doing this because the deer are eating people's strawberries.
I'm just saying that was one of the big arguments, and I'm saying it's not a fair argument, because if it's true that the deer will leave, then that means this isn't gonna work, because they're all going back into the woods.
Well, none of us have made that argument.
None of you guys did.
Right.
I didn't accuse you guys of making that.
I think from what I heard here, the primary motivation is to address the problem in the woods. I'm not worried about, I won't say I'm not worried about the ticks, because I've had Lyme disease 3 times, but I don't attribute that to deer alone. Rodents carry them too. The auto accidents, people are gonna have to be careful, because the deer are not gonna disappear. We're not driving them completely out. We're trying to reduce the population. So it comes down to what are we trying to do in the urban
Right,
community?
I was just making that one point to address.
Yeah,
that.
I'm not criticizing you. I'm just trying to, I'm just telling you how I looked at it. That other stuff was discounted
That's fine.
substantially.
Can I finish or do
Yes,
you want?
no.
You can interrupt if you want.
No, I don't want to interrupt. Oh, no, I was gonna say, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I mean, I think we all agree with you too, that it would be a long-term thing, like no one we talked to said, we can do it and be done. Everyone said it's ongoing forever. I mean, every deer has, 2 baby deer every year, and so the numbers just increase and increase and increase. So that's true. I think the thing about the 2 years is like, we won't know what, if anything, happened for at least that, if not longer. But I think the point was, we need to monitor it and make sure that it is having impact, and if it is or isn't after 2 years, I guess we can, well, someone can figure that out. But you have to keep watching it year after year and see if it does happen.
I'm saying it's disingenuous to say, well, we'll try it for 2 years, because that's not true.
No,
Either
no,
it's gonna be forever or it's not.
I got it.
I guess the thing is,
Not necessarily,
if it
because what
doesn't-
if you tried it and it's not, and
If
it's
it does
really,
nothing.
it's not really.
They're saying it's not, Larry,
doing
like you
it
just
and
said,
you-
it's not doing anything, it's not gonna do anything for 2 years, and Larry said we have to, I'm not criticizing you.
Finish
I'm
what
saying-
She didn't
Finish
finish
what
what she was saying.
Yes, what I'm saying is, I hear you and we are all acknowledging that this is probably a multi-year process, right? But let's say after 2 years, it really, and I'm not saying that it necessarily is or isn't, but it's like a total like failure, right? You're not gonna continue necessarily if it's a complete failure. I think what we are saying is that it is important, I think it is important to sort of know what you're measuring going into this, which is, hold on.
You're interrupting me for something that's already been talked about somewhere else, and it's not fair, but go ahead.
You can go ahead. Go ahead. You can talk.
Because what you were just saying right now, about this whole thing about, well, we have to see about this, that's not going to the point that I was making. You're now going to something that you've already said and other people have already said.
No, I was responding to what you interrupted me saying, Mitch, but listen. I can finish, even if it's not exactly what you're saying, right? I can finish my thought,
So finish your
okay?
thought.
I'm actually
I'm
fine.
obviously very upset,
I
I'm sorry if I cut
understand
you
you're
off.
upset, I know you're upset, and I'm trying to be respectful of your feelings, because I think that's important, but I don't, I want you to also, let us talk about it, and even if we disagree, right, because we obviously disagree, which is fine, and I understand you're upset, it's okay to be upset.
The next thing I want to talk about is the process, and I don't want to talk too much about it because there's a volunteers involved here, but I just want to say that research is my job, or one part of my job as a professor. I was the chair of the Institutional Review Board at Iona for years, I'm still on the board. I have done multiple research projects, I just had a book published by an academic book publisher, respected, based on studies that I have done. And I just want to say that the process by which this decision was come to and the way it was, that a solution was zeroed in on, and then all defense against it. Otherwise, after that, I don't feel like there was open minds to, once this was presented to the board a year and a half ago, there was not open minds to anything else about it, and I'm not gonna go into details on that, I'm just gonna say that's how I think. In conclusion, I just wanted to say that this whole time I've been talking about what the people who run deer killing programs have said. I wanted to keep it in that area so that no one could accuse me of only looking at one side or whatever. I only talked about what people said who were running deer killing programs. But I do want to go back, you read this, I didn't know you were gonna read it, but I want to emphasize what I think is the most important point to me that I've heard so far. And that is the quote from the PETA letter that you got, and I know people are gonna like disparage it because it's PETA, but I don't care who wrote it, I don't care who wrote it, I think it really spoke to me, and it said, forests are dynamic, and expecting to see the same forest that was documented 100 or even 30 years ago is unreasonable, as are any statements indicating that taking no action will result in the death of the forest. Rather than chase after an ideal that is lost, we must today focus on moving forward in ways that are sustainable and compassionate. And I think that one of the reasons why that's so strong is that I think as humans, we can't control nature. And we just had a whole presentation about how hurricanes come and what we have to do to try and keep ourselves from being destroyed by hurricanes. We can't stop the hurricane from coming. We can't control nature. And to think that we can is the ultimate act of hubris, right? And it doesn't mean we can't make smaller changes, we can't build exclosures, we can't try and save some things. But this idea that we can step in and change this by killing these deer is preposterous to me. And on top of that, we don't know what the unforeseen problems come up from doing that. It's like the old thing where you have one thing, you bring the animal to kill the animal, and then the animals now infested, so you bring a third animal to kill the second animal, all these different things. We can't control nature. I just don't understand, well, whatever. And that's how I feel about it, so. It's worthless, it doesn't matter, no one's listening, no one cares, but that's the way.
No, that's not true.
We are listening, we just came to a different conclusion. And since I wasn't on the board before this, everything I've heard has come from January until now. And I've kept a pretty open mind. And if I were putting myself on the range of the people on this board, I'd probably be one of the ones who was closest to you in terms of my views on this issue. But based on what I heard from all of the people that we talked to, including the Humane Society and PETA and people like that, who often, when we would go through it, even the Yale professor, was it you who were on it? Yeah. Who was suggested by your wife, who basically said, you know, you're doing all the right things, you're looking at all the right factors, you're considering, even the PETA person said something like that. Not that she agreed with the conclusion we might come to, but that we were at least taking our time and being educated about it. For crying out loud, I had to put up with 60 plus emails for people screaming, go faster, and I'm the one pushing back saying, well, gee, here's our schedule, this is what we need to think about, and I'm not making any decision without thinking carefully about it. I fully understand the agony of you, what you're going through as you see what you expect will be the decision from this, because we are making decisions, but you've now heard what people are thinking. I'm sympathetic to that, but you have to respect other people's opinions, or maybe you don't necessarily, but this is the way the process works.
When I said the process, I wasn't referring to the board process.
Okay.
I was referring to the process of how this issue came to us and how it was handled after it was brought to us.
Got it.
That is the process that I'm
Okay.
very upset with,
Okay.
not the board's process.
Okay, got it. All right, I'm gonna suggest we let this rest, because even if we're gonna have an actual vote on it, it's probably not gonna be until early June. And we gotta do a little bit of homework anyway. If we're gonna do this, you gotta know whether it's a bid or it's not a bid. I don't know, there's a few other things that we can circle back on.
I think you have to focus on the measurement for sure.
Of course,
You know,
yeah.
figure out that.
I do wanna say, like, I wish, like, there were another option. I mean, we spoke to the person from PETA. She told us that all the other options, they do not support, they don't support. I understand they don't support, which I'm sure, but, and then, you know, I asked her point blank, like, what can we do? And she didn't have an answer. I mean, I think that saying maybe the forest is not meant to have any trees, I don't think that's, I don't know, I think it's a little realistic, you know, like, but if there was, and I don't care what the cost, like, if we could do something, if fencing would work, and I don't think it would, I think like, okay, figure out how to make it work, or if there was another solution that cost 10 times as much as this
I'll tell you what.
program, I'd say let's look into that, like.
I
don't
can
wanna
find a
do-
cost-free method. We're gonna get volunteer hunters and we're gonna get volunteer dogs. But I don't wanna do that because that's not the safest and best approach if we do this.
I just
So,
want to say that since I was done with it, but you brought it up again, it's a bad answer does not suddenly become a good answer because no other answer can be found. If you go to the doctor and say I have a headache and the doctor says I'm gonna cut your head off, it's now up to you to figure out how not to cut your head off? No. That's my point.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, yeah, I mean, we talked to like a dozen experts and no one had anything else, like, as far as what would be a productive change, you know?
But Chris Nagy offered to show us how to do exclusions.
Well, to be fair, Mitch, your question was, if you could not kill deer, what would you do? And then he gave us the explanation that you have repeated, but he also said at the end, that won't solve the problem with the ground cover. So you lose jackrabbit pulpits, you lose trilliums, you lose any kind of flowers on the ground. So it is not perfect. It may be a better solution from your perspective, but it is not a perfect solution. And you have to be willing to move the fence every 7 years or so, however long it takes to grow the juvenile trees to a level that they can't be browsed. And just to go back to the sort of the 2-year issue, I said 2 years because, I mean, we're not gonna sign a contract with somebody that runs out 10. If anything, it's probably more likely that it's an annual renewal, but there is some number between what you suggested being needed to go beyond 2 and what we heard from some of the folks who have had more experience in it, that over time, you will see results, or if you don't, you stop doing this. And that's why I didn't say, okay, let's do a contract for 10 years. First off, you don't know how long the person you retain is available. And secondly, I just don't think that's a good idea.
And also, what if, yes, like now the person is a terrible, like a shot, and they're dragging bodies in front of everybody, which, right, then we would want to say absolutely not. This is a complete failure, irrespective of the forest regeneration, right? This is not working well for a host of reasons. The person that we spoke to in the Audubon Society, which I thought was insane, when she told us that they actually ran a preschool
During the hunt.
during the hunt,
Yeah.
which I was like, okay, wow.
I think that Dan Atchison guy said something like that at camp during.
Yeah, so I think, you know, what we would hope to do, right, is going to be to do this in the best possible way, right? Not to have amateur hunters or people who just get a license, or, you know, to try to do this in the best possible way we could do it, to avoid those kinds of situations where you wouldn't, because I think in the Audubon Society, she said there were no unrecovered animals in the, how many years? It was more than 15.
And by the way, for the sake of the audience, if anybody's ever listening, I was being sarcastic when I said I will get free hunters and free dogs, just in case, so I don't have to get letters on that.
Volunteers?
Yes. Yes, I'm not looking for volunteer hunters. Okay.
Might get more volunteers than Oktoberfest.
Yes, that is possible. All right, I suggest we move on and we'll just revisit this at a point and then come back to everybody. Capital budget.
So we have some handouts. So nothing has changed from what was attached to the agenda. It's just more additional information and presented a couple different ways in here.
So I should use the electronic or I should use the?
You can, this gives more information, but the electronic is still accurate. Okay, so the first listing here, it's broken out by department. And then in subcategories, it's broken out by the fiscal year that the projects would be borrowed for or funded. So since this is the first look, so this is just kind of a broad overview, and then we could always, if there's detailed questions on the different projects, we could always bring departments in at a later point.
We can touch on a couple of important projects, obviously some of the larger ones, but that doesn't mean that if you have questions about any of the other ones, just ask, and if we don't have details tonight, we can get you details for sure.
You want to, are you going to do it by department? Then I can put questions in if you want.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
That's the first schedule here by department, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the Harriman Road project, the Harriman Road Culvert project, that is one that definitely requires some explanation. We applied for a grant and we received a grant of a little over 1.1 million. It was at the time on a project that we expected to be around 2.2 million. The bids were received and we started getting some indications that the project was far more complicated to actually build than was originally contemplated. So We did get bids that were, the low bid was actually 3.5 million, as opposed to 2.2. We believe that there are some value engineering items that can be changed that could bring the cost down to about 3.2. We also have an unused capital project that was related to a FEMA culvert project in the amount of 200,000, which we could use for this purpose. But the balance of that project would need to be borrowed. So originally, we had contemplated it to be around 1.1 million that borrowing would be, but now it's 1.8. And that's where we are. And secondarily, that contract, we did accept bids in the last month. That contract has not been awarded. It's not on your agenda. Primarily because we've been unable to secure an easement from the new owners of 40 South Broadway, 3040 South Broadway, which is Toll Brothers. They have not honored what the previous owners had committed to, which was that they would sign an easement to allow us to work on their property in order to install the western end of this culvert, which empties out onto their property, and they've not done that. So we're, at a bit of a standstill with them on that. Of course, we're gonna keep, working through that, but in the meantime, we can't award a contract. So that's where
Are
we
they
are.
saying no, or are they saying no unless you do X?
It's probably the latter, yeah. I mean, they're not specific yet about tying those two together, but some of the requests are starting to pile up on their side, so we're starting to see
This
that.
is the part of their property that they're not working on at the moment.
Correct. Yeah, this is the 40 South Broadway, the lower house that's there. So that's the update on that project.
What's the story with it? It's a small thing, DPW complex emission reduction.
Yeah, so that's a project that we've identified, and it's exactly what it says. It's for the sole purpose of reducing energy use, reducing emissions.
Any chance we get a grant? It's small, but, or is it just diseconomic to apply for a grant of that size?
So we have a number of environmental projects that are on our plate. Everything from replacement of EVs, replacement of vehicles with EVs, to potential for solar panels at the senior center. There's a few different initiatives. We're replacing ball field lights with LED, which is not a small project, as you can imagine.
Yep.
So there's a number of different projects, and we've spent a lot of time lining up the various grants that are out there, and grants that we've actually obtained already. And we've matched them up with the appropriate projects. This project doesn't have a match with anything. It's not an easy project to go, and I'll be honest about it, it's not an easy project to go to a state representative, for example, and say, can you fund this? There are other projects that the state representative would be far more interested in being involved with than a DPW complex, where, again, just being honest about it. So, but the merits of this project, it's basically getting one building, the sanitation garage, to the point where it no longer needs to have water in it, because the only reason that building is heated during the winter is because there's water in the building. We can get water from a different building, which is already heated. So that building would then go unheated, and the sanitation trucks that are in there can have electric block heaters installed. So that's that project. And the other is to be able to reduce the temperature in the highway garage by enclosing basically their lunch area. The lunch area is dictating the fact that the entire highway garage needs to be at 65 degrees when it doesn't have to be. So if we enclose that one area, then we'll just simply heat and cool that one area. And the rest of the garage can then stay at 40 degrees or, some minimum temperature. So that's the type of project. It's kind of hard to go to a politician and say, hey, do you want to stand in front of your, this DPW complex and tout how you funded this? Because there's other projects that look a lot better than this, but this is a good one from an emission standpoint. So that's that.
Reduces the heating bill.
Yeah, yeah, well, it eliminates the use of the entire boiler in the sanitation garage, that'll be decommissioned. And then the other garage will still be heated, which is natural gas, but it'll be far less.
Do we get points towards the silver, bronze for that?
I'm not sure about that one, I'm not sure.
Because that gets us money too, so it's.
Right. Right, yeah, we might, but it's more important that we're working towards our emissions reduction goal, which is part of our climate action plan that you heard about from Charlotte. So the other larger project that's in DPW is the West Sunnyside Lane culvert. That's the culvert that's at the bottom of West Sunnyside, right by the entrance to historic Sunnyside. And this is a joint project that I think you probably have heard about that involves a small piece in the village of Tarrytown, a piece that's actually on County of Westchester property, and a pretty large piece that's on historic Hudson Valley's property. The three of us, not including the county, the three of us have applied for county funding of this project. And so this, and we feel pretty confident about that, but the project, that doesn't mean that it's going to be free. It's 50% funding is essentially what they would be providing. But this is an important project because the properties at the bottom of the hill were really getting taken out, including one of the historic buildings on historic Sunnyside's property was getting taken out by floodwaters almost. The back patio did for sure, and the house was next. So, so this is an important one. I can touch, so I'll quickly jump on a 2025 project. I know it's not on your plate for this year, but there's a push to replace the street sweeper. We have a street sweeper that's 7 years old. It's had some maintenance issues. That we have a push to replace that, and there actually is an electric version of a street sweeper, believe it or not, and it's charged by a level 2 charger, which is what we have. The problem is that it's almost double. In fact, it's more than double the cost of the gas version. The gas version is somewhere in the vicinity, a little less than 300,000, and the EV version is a little over 600,000. So we are looking very closely at an EPA grant that provides for 50% funding for medium and heavy duty trucks. It's class 6 and class 7 vehicles, and I believe this is a class 6 vehicle. So there's some intricacies with that. I don't know, there's a minimum of 3 vehicles that you have to apply for, so we're gonna probably need to work with our neighbors to put together an application. So it's a complicated effort, but we're doing what the board's policy is, which is to explore in every situation when we replace a vehicle, to explore whether that vehicle can be replaced with EV and whether an EV is right for the job. We know the street sweeper can work. We've had it demoed. We know that the EV, the electric version of it, will last for an entire day. We know that it'll charge fully overnight, and so it can work. It's just that we're not recommending the purchase of it at a double cost. So we really need to see funding for that.
That's great.
Can I ask a question about the firehouse architectural design?
Yeah, that's not new money. That's paying for what we spent.
Okay.
Yeah, and thank you for bringing that up. So that project, you may or may not recall, but there was a resolution passed prior to the bond referendum. There's a resolution passed to be able to spend the money in advance of the actual bond. We had to do some level of design work. What the board actually approved was, I think, about a $650,000 design contract at the time. And what we said to you is that we're only going to spend what's necessary to get to the design that's good enough to be able to go to the public with. And that's the 300 and some odd thousand that you see here. So that's got to be paid for.
So while we're on fire, a couple questions. You get, or same question for a couple entries. Is there any offset to these numbers from the current vehicles? In other words, are they worth anything? So you got a Rescue 49 replacement and Chief's car.
There will be some salvage value. The, for a rescue vehicle, you don't typically see much more than 25 or 30,000. This number, and you know, in fact, Katie and I were talking about this earlier in the week. The rescue replacement is a little bit of a different issue here because we've yet to even generate the specifications for this truck, so we really don't have a complete understanding of how much that's gonna cost.
Yeah.
We've put this in here as a placeholder and we've asked you to commit to borrowing it, but to be honest with you, we're not gonna borrow it until the design work is done. You know, we're gonna spend a little money on the design. I mean, it's a lot like building a house, you know, but, and then once we see the design and see where that's gonna cost out, then we'll finalize our borrowing.
I have a question, it's more of a, I think it's a policy thing, but on the replace chief's car for 2024-25, it's a 2012 car, so it's 12 years old, using the lower year. And then in 2027-28, we have replaced chief's car from 2017, that's 10 years old. Why would that be in the 2029-2030 capital budget?
I think the assumption is that we're gonna get 10 years out of a vehicle like that. As we get closer, we're gonna reevaluate it and see what condition that particular vehicle is actually in. And if it looks like we can push it out, we'll push it out at that time. But I don't think just from a planning standpoint, we don't plan on them lasting 12 or more years, you know what I mean?
This one just happened to.
We were lucky enough to be able to push it out, yeah.
And I know that this 2012 one has needed a lot of repair, but it's been out of service. for-
Yeah, we probably went a little too long with that, so.
I certainly am not.
Yeah,
critical,
no,
I just
no,
saw
no,
the
no,
but I'm just
discrepancy,
saying,
and
I
wanted to
think-
explain the discrepancy.
That
Yeah.
the 10-year is the normal life on those types of.
Yeah, and even that's pretty, that's a pretty good life for.
So let me ask an overriding question. My math is probably bad, but I think I'm looking at $6 million worth of bonding. Am I correct?
It's higher.
It's higher than that,
Oh, good.
$8 million.
So on
Yeah,
the,
so
Oh,
that's
is
what,
there a total somewhere here?
the by-year presentation,
2024, 2025.
yeah, that's the one that separates it out by year. So the bonding would be $8,040,000.
Which means that we're not doing the dog park and we're not doing the stage. The stage grant, we have to check its expiration, but that can be pushed to another year, among other things.
it's,
That was hypothetical, obviously, because we're all gonna have to agree on it, but $8 million a borrow, I'm looking at our normal borrowing is in the 2 or 3, or is that after reduction over time?
Which report are you?
Existing bonds, capital additions, let's see. Existing bonds, non-water, oh, it's less, forgive me.
Yeah, so this report here so the first two columns, with the principal interest are what we have already borrowed, existing projects.
broken out, yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, broken out into bonds and bands, that's all.
Yes.
Bonds and notes.
right, but it's substantially lower in any given year than $8 million. What am I missing here?
Well, 8 million is the total borrowing, but these are annual debt service numbers. These are annual paybacks.
No, I get that. What I did back at the envelope and perhaps a better job was done in totaling it, is take your 2024-25 draft capital budget, bonded cost, and back of the envelope quickly add up all those things for just the 24-25 year. And you're telling me that's about $8 million?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's in there.
It's in.
I'm like, it's in the.
Here,
yeah.
sorry.
I'm looking,
okay.
I printed
I
my
was
own
like,
out and have
you
notes
don't
all
have the
over
back
it.
It's, I have it right
No
on
wonder
this,
I'm not so dense.
it's right on,
I was
Okay.
like,
Is there a,
it's on the screen, actually, so
there.
so
is there a
that's,
chart that shows how much we had in the capital budget borrowed each year?
there you go.
That's, yeah. Well, presumably this reflects that, because it's existing bonds, which is
But Larry's
So
saying
I
it's
think
not
those are
that
the
way
payments,
because,
right? Those are principal
and
payments.
it's also because
interest
things are spread out and you don't know what's been, I don't know.
I do, I didn't
Oh,
include it in
you
here.
are right, you are right. That you, sorry, Mitch, thank you.
Yeah, no.
Because this is what's due in a given year
Right.
of principal and interest as opposed to how much do you
Right.
borrow in a given year. So that would be useful.
Right.
Obviously, you're not gonna be able to give it to me now, but.
But in order of magnitude, there's no question that let's talk about just non-water projects.
Yeah.
Which is about 7.5 million.
Okay.
Not that that's any better, but the 7.5 million is definitely larger than we would borrow in any given single year. And you can tell by the fact that right now outstanding, we have 13, 14 million or
Yeah.
something like that, so, well, but the bond column and the note column,
Okay.
so 14 million. So there's no question it's a heavy year, and your suggestion that some items could or should be pushed off is a good one, and from that standpoint. We didn't bring it to you that way because we want to get a sense of what the board's priorities
Shock
are.
value in that.
Well, right, but I mean,
I'm kidding, I'm
but we need to hear the priorities from that standpoint,
Absolutely.
you know what I mean?
Right, but at this point, we're up to Rescue 49 replacement, and the board seems to be comfortable with an estimate of $1 million for the fire
Yes,
replacement
Well,
this year. We haven't gotten to saying no yet to
Yeah,
some of the other.
I agree.
And the reality is the one-
Thing, I'm just going along with
Yeah,
the presentation, we'll talk about it afterwards,
Yeah.
yes, we will.
But related to my question is the useful life of these various things, because I don't know if you're borrowing for a culvert, is that a 20-year or 50-year useful life? Because doesn't that spread out the life of
That's
the bond?
typically 15 years, so each,
So the
And
next
that's
is
re-
15 to 20 or
and
something?
that's reflected in the
some
schedule
water
here.
projects are 40 years,
But
but
that's reflected for existing stuff, right?
No,
Or is
no,
that's future?
the third, I'm sorry,
Okay.
the third set of columns here, so this
Yeah,
column right
yeah,
here.
yeah. Got it, okay.
Right, so this column here
I'll teach you to
reflects,
print out.
well, I know, we added these schedules, so,
It's fine.
But
It's fine.
that 24-25 capital additions reflects the amortization of those projects based upon their useful lives
Got it.
and what the payback would be over those years.
so this shows that, say, everything on here was approved for 24-25, it would be an additional $695,735 to the tax levy.
In next year's budget.
Right, it'll vary off of, it might be useful to have, unless you tell me this column has it, but I don't think it does based on its title, to have something that tells me what's the grand total of existing bonds, non-water, existing bands, non-water, bands presumably get converted into bonds, and then these capital additions, because is that on a different page?
No, it's not, no,
Because-
but we can do that schedule.
Yeah,
It's not-
because then I know what I'm yes, it's helpful to know what the addition is, but I really wanna know what am I hitting people with based on what exists and what I'm about to do, that's all.
And also
No,
the
I think that's-
comparison year to year, right, and I know that this is not the type of thing where every year can be the same, and I get that, but it's good to know if we're like out of if it's not within the same
Right, if everything falls in a
standard
certain year,
deviation for
yeah.
something,
But I think the schedule does show you, when you say the phrase, what you're hitting people with, I assume that means what the impact on the tax levy is. The
Yes,
the new
yes.
projects that you haven't approved yet.
Yes, it's the incremental amount.
Yes, that's the
I got
that's the rightmost column here.
I got it.
On this schedule, it's on the screen.
Yeah, I'm,
You're looking at it now,
Got it,
okay, yeah. So that's it right there. So
okay.
So I think you can see that it would be wise to spread out projects, at least in those first 2 years, for
Yeah.
sure, because the first year, you're adding on almost 700,000 of debt service. In the next year, it's still a pretty healthy number, but you could even it out, it's 215,000. You could certainly even it out somewhat, but it's based upon the priorities that you talk about. So,
Okay, you wanna keep going?
yeah, So, well, we were down to fire, is that, we're okay with that?
I'm confused, are we going by department or are we going by year?
Well, it's department and year, because it's.
No, I know
We
that.
started out
There's
by
two different
department,
lists.
yeah.
We're going by department?
We
Okay.
started out with the initial schedule, which is by
I
department,
keep going to the different,
you know.
Staples not our friend here.
Yeah, I'm looking at that schedule that you had on, that one. That's the one I'm looking at.
Yeah, this is the one by year. No, sorry, yes, this is the one by year, but we were going by department.
Right, that's why I'm
Initially.
confused, yeah, okay, so we are going by department.
Whatever you prefer, but.
Year under department, department
Yeah.
and by year under
Yeah.
department.
Yes.
Right, which is further back. Okay. Okay, so we were in the fire department. So the one thing that we can do, and Katie and I debated this a bit about how to present this, but for the Rescue 49 replacement, while it shows up as a 24-25 project, the reality is that by the time you design the vehicle, bid it out, and then construction begins, you're probably not paying for it at least until 25-26. So you really can push that borrowing off by a year. So that's $1 million that could go down to the 25-26 line. But we needed to get the project in front of you because we can't tell the designer to start designing unless I know that the board is ready to purchase a replacement vehicle. You know what I mean? There's a chicken and an egg thing here. So that's really what the issue is, because to their credit, the fire department leadership has been coming to us saying, here's a proposal from a designer, and it's not a lot of money, but it's still, still something, but can we get them working? And the answer is, well, no, the board hasn't approved the purchase of this yet. So we need to get to the point where you say, yes, we want to do this. We can move the borrowing ahead and push it off by a year, which is what we would plan.
Can I ask a question? So if we approve this, when is it would be built when?
I'd have to see the exact schedule, but just based on my past experience, by the time you even bid this out, it's probably going to be 6 to 9 months from now. And then, if you're lucky enough to start construction, it's probably a year after that. So it would be into
2 years.
Yeah, it would be into the following fiscal year.
You assume you pay some upfront and the rest in delivery?
You won't pay anything upfront, but you'll pay for milestones like the chassis being delivered. There's certain milestones along the way.
So then how does this sort of dovetail into our firehouse facilities project? And, if that's gonna go into construction or if we're gonna, build something that looks different, how does that?
We still, I can only speak to the facilities planning committee, that they were estimating it's probably another month or two, or maybe even 3, before they come back and say, okay, here's what we're gonna present to you, here's how we're gonna do it, is that okay with you? And then they're gonna start doing the work. So I don't think you're gonna see a construction project that's gonna happen, or even break ground in the next year or two, is my guess.
Yeah.
But this is just a straight one-for-one replacement of an existing.
No, that's what I'm trying to
Truck.
get, I'm just trying to get my, just like,
Yeah.
so then it wouldn't really matter that we would just replace it and then.
Right.
Okay.
And it wouldn't have to be constructed in such a way that it has to be a different size because of the current configuration of the firehouse. This vehicle's a pretty standard size that we have.
That was gonna be my next question, about the size.
Yeah, no, there's nothing unusual about it.
Okay.
So can we tell the fire department that they should go ahead with getting the specs done?
We'll do that we'll do that formally when you adopt the capital budget, just to try to keep it on the level. All right. Not too much in police, it's pretty straightforward.
What's variable message display signs?
That was a request they made for one of those display boards that is usually on a trailer that sits on the side of a road to announce when construction is taking place or a detour is in effect, I think there's been a few times where we've used that. There have been some times where we've borrowed one from Greenberg, but there's been times where they haven't been available and we would have liked to have it. So I think they were making the argument to purchase one in-house.
Where would you store it, those are big.
Yeah, it's probably either on the apron here or down at DPW. They're not, I think the one we would look at is not quite as big as some of the DOT-sized ones.
So my mental picture is bigger than what the actual one is.
Probably, yeah, but we'll make sure we have the room.
They're sure they don't want my 10-year-old to make them signs. I have them Ava.
Oh, that's an inexpensive option. Okay.
Want to go to rec?
Yeah, so,
Any electricity savings from the LED stuff?
yes, definitely, and actually I can circulate around some details, we just got that this week, or last week. But let me first explain that there's the lights for the ball fields are replaced roughly every 10 years. There's an upcoming replacement that's necessary. It's not, it can be expensive, but we kind of pay into it a little bit each year as part of our maintenance contract, so that at the end of the 10 years, then the lights get replaced without a tremendous cost. This cost here, it was told to us that there is an LED upgrade option. It's very expensive, as you can see. The energy use savings is about 40 to 45%, which is what we saw on all the streetlights when we replaced those. And that was real dollars, that wasn't, just a phantom number. So there's certainly some payback there. It's not gonna be super fast on its payback, but it's still in the 10-year range or so. But again, this is one where we believe we've identified a grant, as long as we have some cooperation from the Speaker of the Assembly's office, to redirect a grant that was originally intended for EV charging stations that we no longer need because of the county grant program. So we're asking to redirect this to a nice project like this that I think any assembly member would be happy to stand in front of, so.
So that's where the 100,000 comes.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything with a grant makes everything go down a lot easier.
Yeah, well, and the payback.
Except, what would the cost be to not replace it with LEDs?
It's not much.
Right, I mean, we're talking about a really
It's a real cost, yeah, but it's a one-time.
Right.
No, what I'm saying is if we have a chance to make an investment to help, something that's so environmentally important and we're getting money for it, it's a lot more palatable.
Right, yeah, no, but it's not, again, we're putting these out here as identified projects. The park is still gonna function with or without this project. We're
Right,
just
so I
trying to
just
be,
wanted the rest of the board to know what that cost would be
Yeah.
if we weren't doing
yeah,
LEDs.
it's not much.
It's about
because it's-
15,000.
Yeah, it's not much, exactly.
Is it like cheaper after this conversion, like 10 years down the line to renew it again? I mean, I guess everything, well, no.
Yes,
The
well,
technology is cheaper, but I guess inflation goes up, but,
yeah, no, what you're paying for is the retrofit,
okay.
because all of the units have to be worked on, and all of the units are up, 60 feet in the air or whatever it is, so it's a complicated project. But the retrofit is what you're paying for with this. The bulb replacement in the future would be something that would be covered by a routine maintenance contract. So,
So the closer to what we have today after we spend all this money to do that.
what's that?
It'd be closer to what we have today after we spend all the money to do the retrofit.
Yeah,
And that sounds like something that would also gain us points, on our various,
it should, it should. Yeah, and it certainly reduces our
you
energy
got a
use.
lot of points for the streetlights.
Yes.
I just want to say about the dog park, I don't know why, because I feel like I don't get a lot of, like I told you, people only want to talk to me about the problems they have with the process of redoing their houses or whatever, but the other thing that people have reached out to me about is the dog park. Like, people want a place to take the dog. And I mean, I have a dog, but I don't really need a dog park, so it's not a personal thing for me. It's more just one of those things where I feel like there's a lot of people that feel strongly about it.
Yeah, I get the same thing too, but for whatever it is, $675,000, it just seems crazy, particularly when there's one in Greenberg that's accessible to us.
You mean the one, the Rumberg?
Yeah.
It's far to go, though. We've gone there, but, you know.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I did it when I had a dog too.
I should point out that the problem that we had with this, and the reason that the cost escalated is because of the requirement to provide ADA access to this area. It's about half of this cost is being dedicated to the ADA accessibility
We look
issues.
for another location.
I mean, that's something that the Recreation Department had done pretty extensive work on probably, 10 years ago or more?
Maybe it's worth the
And I'm
night.
not saying that, you know, that there isn't another option, but they had done a lot of work on that. And the conclusion at that time was that a place like behind the reservoir was actually the chosen place.
Yeah.
And that ended up failing. I mean, it didn't, you know, the board did go forward with it.
I'm not sure, are you hearing that people want a dog park, or are you hearing that people want a place to take their dogs? Or
Yes.
be with their dogs?
So some people say to me that they're upset that Matheson Park never reopened to dogs because it used to be, and other people say we need to build a dog park. So it's been,
Right, it's not one,
Yeah,
it's a combination of,
it's
I'm
both.
hearing both.
Yeah, it's both or either, depending how you look at it. I don't wanna qualify it. It probably is both, I agree with you, but like I wanna try and be careful about this. And I think from a kind of, if I was doing a qualitative research project, I would feel comfortable saying at least or and possibly and.
Well,
I think the difference people see is they imagine a dog park as being off leash, whereas like if it was in Madison.
Correct.
Dog would be on the leash.
Correct.
But people want, both, I guess.
It depends, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
If we don't do this version of the dog park, it would be worth looking again at whether we could have, there used to be the early morning hours in Matheson for dogs. I don't know if that would
I
make.
mean, and also, I mean, many parks have dogs on leash. Like, it's not, you know, a crazy idea. It's not some wild and crazy idea to have a dog in a park.
Maureen's
Just-
looking closely,
I
she's like.
just want to put that out there. Just saying that, Maureen, not directly in your direction.
On
but,
leash, yes. Problem is when, the problem is with the owners, not the dogs.
Yeah. No, but you have rules, right? I mean, you're gonna always have the issue of, right, will people follow the rules?
And Larry was right, that there's, and Larry, they both said it's two different things, right? It's like, do you want to have a place for the dog to go, you know, which is different, you know, they're both helpful in different ways.
I don't, I think it's a good idea if we could look at another location that would be cheaper. I don't know how much change in
Just
10 years.
Yeah, I mean, because 10 years is like a long time and things change and maybe not, I don't know, things don't change, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, I
We
mean,
got rid of the splash pad at the playground.
It's replaced by, I think, picnic tables and stuff, right?
Yeah,
What happened with the splash pad?
not the one here, the
Oh.
Station road.
station room playground.
Remember there was the whole thing caved in and stuff?
Oh, that,
Yeah. What about, I know a couple people, I'm sure there's a reason why it can't be, but a couple people
yeah, no,
suggested
it
to
wasn't
me
used.
that in the northeast corner of Matheson Park, could there be a dog park there?
that's where the stage was.
That's where the stage
Well,
is.
it's just gonna go more this way, isn't it?
That's MTA access.
Oh, MTA access.
But that
I
also
knew there's
is,
a reason, but it's good to have an answer when people say it to me, so that helps, thank you.
but that is where the stage is planned too, in that corner. It's not centered where you typically see the showmobile when we have Oktoberfest.
Right.
It's over,
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, it's good to know also. But I thank you for the MTA thing, because this way I have information, I like to have information to feel less reason.
I'm just gonna make another push since Maureen is here. We really should explore the leash dogs in our parks.
Matheson, all of
Not
them?
as- and even scenic. I mean, all the parks I think along the water have dogs, right? Pearson Park has dogs.
Can you do it in scenic? Are there any restrictions?
I don't know,
Yeah.
I think if you
I
wanna
picked
ask,
one.
well, no, I mean, you can ask
Yeah.
whatever you want, but, and you have your chairman here, but I think,
Every scenic Hudson Park of the 50
Huh.
has dogs on leash, except this one. 49 of the 50
Yeah.
are dogs.
And
That's right.
there's a reason for that, because none of the other ones have ball fields that are gonna make dogs go crazy chasing after balls.
I mean, they have
Not
balls
if they're
for
on leash
kids.
though, right?
I think you should make a request to RPAC to explore this with,
Good idea,
Just so you
yeah.
know, scenic,
No, I'm just saying.
Matheson was designed
Or maybe
To
more
allow
than just
dog
our
access.
park, because.
on leash,
Was designed.
was designed. Why do you think there's a fence around
Yeah.
the playground?
Yeah.
Because that was our biggest concern, is having dogs chase after kids that are running around, you know, just having a good time.
I mean, but understood, but every single park has kids running around, like Pearson Park has a lot of people who like doing lots of things, and like when they have their stage and they have lots of people there, kids are running around, their playground doesn't have a fence, and they're like running around and people are walking their dogs, I don't,
Is that Terrytown you're talking about?
Terrytown.
Yeah.
And so does Pascone Park, also has dogs and
So-
kids running around.
So can I
The picture
suggest,
was talking about-
can I suggest that we ask RPAC, we tell RPAC that we're not inclined to fund the dog park that we've been talking about for the last 2 years for $675,000, and that they may want to review their thoughts about dogs on leash in parks and urban.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we can have a
Right,
public
I mean,
comment.
it's a different time period.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Matheson has been used in a different way than it was when they first discussed it.
Yeah.
And there's different people on RPAC, at least some,
Yeah, and we can
and they
invite,
feel differently.
yeah, and we can invite public comment, right, like, let's see how the public feels about it too.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, I'd be curious if anyone from Mark has ideas on a location that might be cheaper to have.
We've been looking at it for 10 years.
No.
There is no other way.
I remember from my
The
first go
spot
around.
was,
No, yeah,
the
I
spot they chose was a great spot, but.
No, it is expensive.
Except for the AD access.
What?
Except for the AD
No,
access.
This is the
No, no,
first
no,
one.
No, the first go around.
Behind the,
Reservoir.
and why did that not work?
Because it was in the Irvington Woods Park,
Oh,
and it was gonna take 1 acre of 250 acres
I can tell the tone by the tone you're saying.
for active use in a
Yeah.
park that
Well, maybe,
Wasn't used that
was that 10 years ago? Maybe that's
it
changed
was
too.
more than 10 years ago.
Maybe that's changed,
Probably 10 years ago.
maybe that view has changed, right?
Is there parking by the? where the
Well,
park
that's
is?
where it is, where that park.
Oh, by that
the
parking lot.
is
Oh,
off
so
of
it's already a
Fairfield.
parking lot.
Well, we're not
No,
gonna
it's
solve
up
it,
the
we should ask
Yeah.
our PAC to
Yes, thank
give
you.
us some suggestions.
But I do think it's important that what I hear from the board, right, is that we want a dog solution.
Yes, I think
Right?
so.
That'd be true.
I feel like, huh?
That could be read the wrong way, like we wanna
Right.
get.
Oh my God.
Especially since
Yeah.
I already went after the other day, I don't want to write
No,
for the dogs also.
meaning if we're looking at the budget for the dog park, and
Lots of
we're like,
solutions
oh my
tonight.
goodness, $675,000 is too much. I think to say, okay, now we're gonna do nothing, there's no other solution, I think that's kind of unfair for residents, right? We know that dogs in parks is a thing that exists everywhere, so it's okay to have them in our parks.
Yeah, well, that's why we should
Yeah,
ask our.
Exactly, to figure, right, but I'm
And to
just
come
saying that
back
we,
to us with
correct,
a
but-
recommendation.
correct, we're giving them direction that this is something we want.
But I think we're not ditching the dog park, we're tabling it, right? We're pushing it into the future possibly, or?
Correct, but not this particular version unless, I mean, to me, spending 675 grand on a dog park, particularly in the context of whatever it was, $8 million worth of borrowing is not.
And when the original estimate was 250.
Right.
No, I understand.
Right.
I do think we should be mindful that, it's funny, cause I said to somebody I said, yeah, well, I live in an apartment, so it's even harder, and he said, look at the houses off of Main Street, the backyards are very, very small, so they have the same problem as the people who live in
Yeah.
co-ops do, so
Yeah.
it seems to be a bigger problem in the village than most people think. If you have a big house and you're used to having a big yard, it seems like, oh, what's the problem? But there's a big chunk of Irvingtonians, I hate saying that,
That don't have access.
who don't have access, either because they have a very small backyard or they don't have a backyard at all.
Yeah, there's a need, right, there's a
There's no
desire.
park access. Right, exactly.
Alright.
Well, yes, I mean, yeah. But as you said, it's two different things, right?
Well, let's see if we can make use of an existing resource.
Agreed. But again, just so we're clear, I'm not arguing, but I wanna make
Yeah.
sure we're understanding it, is that it is a difference between letting the dogs into the park on leash
Yes,
and having a dog park where you can take the leash off and let them run around like.
I understand.
yes, I agree.
Yeah. Well, the dog owners may not get both. They may only get one of
I'm
them.
just saying, just this year, just this year.
Okay, so we'll remove the dog park from the capital budget. and then take the other steps you just talked about.
And what do you wanna do about the stage?
So that's
Push it
my
off a
next,
year?
well, that's my next question.
I mean, in the context of that much borrowing, I would say yes.
I think the only thing to check though is the grant, right? We
Well,
don't-
yeah, of course.
I asked Larry already.
Yeah, this
but
came
we'll
up,
double check, but
right,
yeah.
and this came up like literally right before the meeting, so I'll double check on the grant. Typically, when we sign a grant agreement, they're for 5 years.
Oh, okay.
So we should be okay, but I have to go back and double check for sure. But assuming that that's the case, then is the suggestion then to push that
I'd
off?
push it off a year, yeah.
Is there like a similar thing with the fire, like the rescue truck, like if we did wanna build the stage, how much of this $1 million, like, would we need that all? This next budget year?
Well, yeah, I mean, what we were hoping to do and what we are planning to have on your agenda on Monday night, subject to this discussion, is we were gonna have a change order on,
Next meeting.
Monday, our next meeting is Monday.
I thought our
The
next
20th.
meeting. Okay, I'm sorry, I don't mean to comment.
Monday night,
20th.
the 20th, yeah. At your regular meeting,
Go ahead.
right,
It's in my calendar for Wednesday, it's not out, right?
no.
Um,
So at that meeting, we have a change order to slightly increase the contract with the designer that we had engaged for the stage. We had done about $65,000 worth of design work in order to get to the point where we had a cost estimate. And of course, that's what's halted us in our tracks. We were gonna, assuming that this project was going forward, we were gonna get the design works restarted. You've already borrowed that money in a capital project, so we would have enough to complete the design and get it to construction document stage. And then the suggestion then is to, if that happened, we would be able to do that probably by the end of the year and do bidding in the spring and construction next summer or spring, summer. So we could have done it in next fiscal year.
So so you would have done 25, 26.
Yes,
I'd be okay with that. In other words, assuming that was phrased as a question, can you use the money that we've already borrowed for the completion of the planning process
and then,
to actually complete the plans?
right, and then we would put off construction until next fiscal year,
Yeah.
at which time this would be in your capital budget for
Yeah.
25, 26.
Is everybody else okay with that?
Well, that number's a lot lower, I think that number's at 2 or 3, right, for 25, 26?
Yeah, right now it is, yeah.
No, I
Until we start
understand.
moving things around. Yes.
I understand that.
Yeah, yeah.
What are we gonna see on Monday night?
It was a small change order for the contract with the designer.
So there's no
You have enough money.
picture or view of what we're talking.
We have sketches I can circulate around, yeah.
Yeah, that's
Sure.
worth doing.
But I
Yeah,
wouldn't mind
absolutely.
seeing-
Yep.
Cause I haven't seen any updated.
Okay,
Larry, does the rec department have copies of what the stage is gonna look like and where it's going?
yeah, I mean, it's only schematic design at this point. And yes, Joe had it. I don't know how much he circulated it, but he had it.
Not at all.
Okay.
Only because.
I'll circulate it around.
Where it sounds like you're putting it is gonna be, it's gonna negate being able to have fireworks. Which is why we have, the current stage where it is, because the fireworks can always go behind that. I'm just
I don't
throwing, I just
No,
wanna
that's
see the
fine.
drawing.
Yeah, I don't think that came up as an issue when Joe was
Oh, Joe
dealing
certainly
with this.
would have made an issue out of it.
What's that?
Joe certainly would have made an issue out of it.
Yeah, no,
That's where it was when he was looking at it.
Yeah, no, he was involved in the placement and all of that, so. Okay, I'll circulate everything around, for sure.
I wanna ask a philosophical question. On the assumption, what?
Got fireworks?
No.
About
I'm
night.
sorry.
No, that's
John is
that's
very
okay.
sensitive to fireworks.
No. The question is this. If we talk to the facilities planning committee, and if my estimate is right that it's gonna take them a year before they even come back with sort of proposals for building, is there a reason we're not reducing this pig in the python with borrowing by taking some fund balance for instead of borrowing at what is
Well,
now,
we
what,
did-
5%?
We did do it for the
Yeah, but that was a
regular budget.
small number. I'm talking about like $1 million.
Right.
Because if our actual shovel in the ground is, multiple years away, and I hope that's not the case. I don't know, David, you're still on facilities planning committee, right?
Mike is saying, if everything works nicely, the doors could open in 4 years at a minimum.
Okay,
So shovel in the ground is 3 years.
all right, that's good perspective. So my question is, at one point I didn't want to touch a penny of that because I thought, we might actually have a quick turnaround on some of these projects. And I certainly don't want to use too much of it up, but, do you, in today's environment where the rates are still relatively high, I hope, going forward anyway, is this the time to take some money out of that and smooth it out? And I'm not bringing back the stage or bringing back the dog park, I'm just asking that philosophically.
I mean, we can certainly look it over and.
Because you got seven million, I wanna say, in the fund?
Yeah, 7 million.
It's a page that I haven't looked at,
We
right?
have 7 million.
7,028,000 as of the end, as of 5/31.
So you could help with this bump
Yes.
by taking some money back. So,
Yeah, and we've done that before.
Yeah.
I think 2 years ago, we basically funded the entire capital budget with fund balance.
and sort of relating to
It
that.
wasn't as big, but.
Right, relating to that question,
That's true, which is probably why I
The-
think it's a good idea to say.
let's say, we agree to a capital budget and it's $6 million. You're gonna put bands in place as you actually need the money for a given project, and then you'll bond the whole thing at a point in time? Is that the way the process will work? Because you're not just borrowing up front so that we're paying 5% while we sit here and figure out what we're doing on a given project.
We're only borrowing for the first year approved projects. So,
But do you borrow up front or do you borrow
Let's
like in
take
scale?
the fire truck, for example, let's assume it's gonna be ready in, at the beginning of this next fiscal year. You would not borrow $1 million right then and there, you would do bands as you had to pay for installments, and then you bond it all at a point in time? That's a question.
yeah, okay, so hypotheticals are hard to deal with.
All right.
Most
You define
projects,
on that. Yeah.
most projects get built in 3 to 6 months, maybe 9 months.
Yeah.
We don't borrow incrementally over those 3 to 6 to 9 months because going out to the market costs money. So we go out to the market once a year.
Okay.
Okay, so typically, we go out to the market right now in roughly November, early December, and we borrow for that current fiscal year's projects, but we would only borrow the amount that we would expect to have to pay on those projects. Normally, that's 100% of what the capital projects are. If there happens to be a project that is in the unusual category, which were kind of the hypothetical that you were bringing up.
Yeah.
If there happens to be one that clearly is gonna have a delay on payout, like the fire truck is a perfect
Yeah.
example. We're not gonna be paying that, then we won't borrow it. We'll borrow it in the following year's borrowing, if that's the right time. When the firehouse was on the agenda, that, we weren't borrowing $18 million in 1 year. We were borrowing 7 and then 6, and then, whatever we thought the payouts were gonna be in the construction process. But that was a big multi-year project, so that was an unusual one.
In the fire truck scenario, could you have pulled money from the fund balance and then bonded the whole thing later on? In other words, any project that is an installment process, installment sale.
Yes.
Installment payment.
You can always pay money in advance of issuing the note.
Okay.
It has
And
to
then
be,
you
we
can-
have to have,
you're
that's what we did with the
replenishing
firehouse.
and you're borrowing the whole amount, including what you pulled from fund balance to pay for it.
Right,
Okay.
if that's what you decided how
Yeah,
to
I
fund it.
understand. I
That's
just
exactly
don't know
what we
the
did with the
options.
firehouse project, for example.
Yeah.
We said, we're not gonna go out and issue a note for $650,000 for the design of the firehouse. We have enough reserves that we can pay it as the bills come in, And then at the end, when we figure out how much we actually were gonna spend on design, because we didn't know, we knew it would be less than 650,000, we didn't know how much less. Then we go out to the market, which is what we're doing here. So that's an example of what you're saying.
Okay.
Is any part of our fund balance limited in our ability to draw on it because of investments in time-sensitive notes or things like that?
So we do have a CD that will expire in March of next year.
But I remember that we were trying to take advantage of the higher interest rates.
Yes.
Yeah, but that was, but we left plenty of room in working capital, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I forgot how much the amount was, 7 million.
About, yeah.
7 million, yeah. So while 7 million sounds like that's our entire fund balance, it really isn't, because we have tax revenue that comes in at the beginning of the year. We usually have half of our tax levy as working capital at any given point in time. So there's gonna be money in the bank if that's the question, yeah. I mean, unless you turn around and say, we wanna spend 4 million of our fund balance, you know, then things might be a little tight, but until March. But I don't think that's where you're going with this. You probably, so to get a sense of what you're saying, what you're suggesting is, if we're gonna use fund balance, maybe look at something on the order of $1 million.
Yeah.
Applying that to this year's capital budget.
Yep.
Okay, we can come back with that.
Everybody's sort of okay with that? We're not making a decision, that's just.
Well, we'll come back and show you what that means.
Yeah,
That's all, yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
When does this have to be finalized, or just?
It doesn't have to be finalized at any given point.
It's not like the regular budget that is, yeah.
We try to push it so that it's done by June, so that we can get whatever projects have been
Planned,
underway, start working on things, but
Okay.
especially construction projects. But we've had years where it's been, you know, July and even August where
I'll
we'll approve
try
it.
not to break that record.
That's fine.
I just want to mention, included in these numbers here, so there is fund balance usage, about 364,000. And that's to fund some of these
Smaller projects.
smaller projects.
Is
Like
that
that-
gonna be other
Like that
sources?
DPW.
That would be, so other sources here, could either be grant funding or fund balance.
Well, that one, not particularly, Larry. I don't think that one we designated as being fund balance, but yeah, because otherwise we would have, I'm sorry, Larry suggested
Otherwise, it
that
would have been in that other column.
you would have seen other funding sources of fund balance there, yeah.
Can I confirm one thing that I know I'm right about, but I don't feel better hearing that I'm right about it? So when we vote on this, we're really only committing to 24, 25, the rest is planning. And then next year, if something's in 25, 26, that's the time to talk about whether, okay, so we shouldn't be commenting on anything besides 24 or 25 right now, for the most part.
No, well,
You can ask.
no, you can comment on all of it.
Well, I'm saying there's urgency to
But-
comment on.
Right, but there's implications. If you leave something in for 24, 25, it's gonna get borrowed on and,
Yeah,
you
no,
know,
I understand.
Like by saying 250,000 for the dog park, nobody complained, it became 670,000 in this year's budget.
Right, I understand.
But
what
we
you're saying.
never borrowed that money. It was
Right.
just- It was just in there as a future year,
But
yeah.
then it comes up.
Yeah.
I agree that that's very expensive for a dog park. But I would like to find a way to have a dog park that doesn't cost $650,000. I'm not giving up on the dog
I
park.
think we're in agreement.
Yeah.
Just not $650,000.
I think you and a lot of people.
So there is,
Solution.
Yeah.
there is one project in here towards the end that,
Go ahead.
so, we were up to, theater.
Yep.
So the theater includes a $700,000 borrowing for the air conditioning. That's a project that, for many years was budgeted at $1 million, but frankly, it was a placeholder at $1 million. We did receive $625,000 in funding from, Andrea Stewart Cousins' office, 500, and from then Tom Abenanti's office for 125. And the project is is, and it probably never was, $1 million. I think for those of you that have walked through upstairs, there's a lot wrong upstairs that we're correcting, and it's not just air conditioning. So we're doing it all at once. It's a project that is enormously complicated, as you know, but last I heard, 1.7 million is the number, and it's going to be the number, and it's going to be open by September 1st, come hell or high water.
We're still on that?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's what they said today.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
You can ask them next month, in June.
Oh,
I think the quote was, there may be bodies, but it's going to be open, so.
there may be bodies?
Yeah. So, but it's a challenge. I mean, the best example today was, and this is like an $8,000 problem, is as they're painting the skylight that they've covered over, the tin ceiling is basically, you can put your finger through it. It's completely
Right.
rotted in many places. So that we're replacing the tin ceiling while we have the scaffolding up, because why would you ever do that? Why would you ever leave it that way?
Yeah.
So, but that's $8,000 and 2 weeks of time, or 1 week of time. But it's getting done. And that, I will point out one that is in the future. I did include a project here for the Enslaved African Memorial. It's a project that we never actually had in a capital budget before, because it never quite got off the ground. So this project is here at $340,000. We are estimating the memorial itself to be $250,000, and then we need about roughly $90,000 of improvements in the area, and this is at the corner of South Buckout Street and Station Road. We need about $90,000 of curb and sidewalk improvements to kind of create more of a plaza area there, as opposed to just the street corner that's there.
Wait, so 240,000, that's just for like a statue?
I don't know what it's gonna be.
Or does that include like seating and things like that?
I don't know what it's gonna be.
Well, because to me, it's two different things.
Yeah, well, but
Well, you're right, it is two different things. It's the garden, whatever the memorial is, but it's also, I'll call it pedestrian safety aspects of it, yes?
well, that's the 90,000, right?
Yeah.
But the 250 for the memorial area is, I don't think the design was just a statue. It was an area. We don't have a design, by the
Right.
way. I don't know if you know the history
don't
of
have a
this, but.
committee.
No, I do, I know the whole thing.
Right, okay, so.
Right, but
so-
my point is, I don't want it to be about the subject of this memorial at all, but I mean like, 250,000 to create a nice little park where people can sit and stuff is a bargain. $250,000 for a statue is not
I
a
don't think
bargain.
it's a statue.
What's, you know what I'm saying? It's
Yeah,
like, you know.
So I don't know, because I wasn't part of that, I wasn't on that committee, like that specific committee sort of got, if I remember, put together kind of strangely in my opinion, because it was like certain people, like, it was like, I think different, I don't remember, I wasn't on that committee, but I remember maybe from Commemorate, there was one person who was like the representative from Commemorate, but it never really got off the ground because there was that
We got as far as,
storm.
right, so,
Yeah, the storm wiped out the area and that put everything back.
So what this
Right.
tells us
It's
is
more
that
more.
before we go too much further, let's say 6 months from now or less, we gotta get the band back together again so that we have somebody who can give us some guidance.
right.
I don't think it was necessarily that.
Yeah, I think you'll need to reconstitute the committee.
Yeah.
And get it restarted.
It's been-
We got as far as doing an RFP for a designer. We had interviewed a number of designers and had come to actually a chosen design team. And before we could actually enter into a contract with that design team, the site got wiped out, and then the project, was put on hold.
Okay.
So we don't even have a contract with the design team, not that it would matter anyway, it's 3 years later, so. But that's where we were.
Was Peter Bernstein on that one, is that?
No, actually, from Commemorate, it was Kelly Scott, who doesn't live here, and then I think Sarah was gonna ask to replace her. I don't remember who else did.
I have notes on it, I'm sure.
Let me just ask everybody on the board, to just think about people who might be appropriate members, just not immediately, but, before we are sitting here doing next year's capital budget and having to punt this down the road, it'd be good to have a group that's thinking about it.
Is the site even ready for this now? Has it been remediated, or I don't know what the right term is?
Yeah, I mean, the site's there's some challenges because some of it's actually not our property.
Right.
So, you know,
That's
that'll have,
before.
Just that.
but that'll have to get worked out.
Is
I mean,
there more, like with all the culvert work being done and everything, I know a lot of it comes down there, does more work need to be done down there regarding the flooding and the water direction? Okay, that's good to know.
No, and if and when there's a larger solution for the flooding of South Buckout, South Astor, and then under the tracks to the Hudson, that's that larger culvert that needs to be, and that's a, you know, that's not in here anywhere,
Yes.
trust me. But if and when that work has to happen, this site will be out of the way of anything that would have to do with that.
Alright.
So we're not, we're setting ourselves up in the right place here.
So we're ready for this discussion?
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I think so, but I just wanted to point out, it's in the capital budget. We may have to come back to you and say, you know, can we spend a few dollars on the design team when we select a designer at some point? I don't know how quickly that's gonna happen, you don't have a committee yet.
Yeah.
When I asked about 25, 2026 before, that's the item I wanted to ask about, so I'm
Okay.
glad that you brought it up.
That's,
Can I ask a water sewer question?
of course, yeah.
You're targeting sort of specific projects here. How do they fund the multiple surprises? That's all operating budget, you know, pipes freeze and snap and
Yeah.
it's all operating, okay.
All those water main breaks.
We have a pretty large professional services line, I guess it's called, in the water department
Okay,
that funds that.
okay.
In some years we're less, in some years we're more.
All right, so we probably made this much more complicated.
I just have one more project I wanted, in library. So during the operating, budget, library actually mentioned their, replacement of library VAV controls,
Yes.
which stands for
Air
variable
volume.
air volume controls. So during their budget presentation, they said that they would use fund balance for that project. So the total project is quoted to be about $145,000. I took a look at their fund balance. So at the end of last fiscal, they had about $233,000, and then they appropriated $14,000 of fund balance for their part-timer last year, and then they also plan to use another $14,000 for the 24-25 budget. So without this capital project, their fund balance is at about 19%. If they were to use all of their fund balance for this library project, it would bring it down to about 5%. So they would only have about 60,000 left over.
They get funded because we moved from the general fund?
Yes.
All right, so I mean, it's fund accounting, does it actually matter as long as our fund balance is well funded?
As long as we'd be
Right.
willing to use general fund,
Got it.
you know, if they needed it.
All right. Yeah, I mean, if you get to the point where it's really slim and you think we should be making a transfer, then just, you can recommend it.
Okay,
Is this the library we're talking about?
Yeah.
yes.
I always like to give them leeway because they have so many expenses that other departments don't have.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and and I'm not, you know,
the building.
my comment was more an accounting type question is, does it really matter which hand is holding the money?
Yeah.
Yeah, and because of those reasons, I didn't know if maybe we didn't want to use all that much fund balance, maybe use half of it and then borrow the other half to give them more room, but there's always the general fund
So
option
backstop,
to
Yeah.
support them.
Okay, all right, is that it?
That's it for that one.
That's it.
It's not it for the agenda.
I got it, all right. Pro-housing, this is yours. Pro-housing, it's ours, but your request. Pro-housing community programs. Now, I don't think, this is just at the moment for our education, because if I'm remembering correctly, to qualify, we've got to adopt the resolution and then submit certain information, correct?
Right, so,
Yeah,
so
but-
basically, well, Larry, do you wanna?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
This, You may remember last year, Governor Hochul had an iron fist, and this year she has a carrot and a stick. And the carrot and the stick is to tell communities that if they state that they're willing to put forward the value of affordable housing, transit-oriented development, and other types of multifamily housing, that they will qualify for certain types of funding that if you're not part of that, you would not qualify for. Now, that funding is listed on here. Some of that funding, I think we've determined that our village might not be eligible for anyway, but there is some other funding that we would be. And all you have to do to get on the list is not necessarily build affordable housing at the moment, but show that there's a commitment towards doing that.
Which is option 2, right?
Which is option 2,
What is all
exactly.
that stuff about documentation on their zoning map? Like,
Right, so basically what they're asking you to do is, one, adopt a particular resolution that's a little bit different than the resolution that the board adopted in favor of affordable housing back 3 to 4 years ago. But it's essentially the same. As a matter of fact, the board resolution actually said that the board would be willing to fund those things, and I don't think it actually says that the board.
So we're promising
that
less
the
than we've
village
already
would fund.
promised.
Right.
Yeah.
And then just supply them information, the information being the zoning that we've done to help to facilitate, like what we did up on North Broadway, and then certain documentation from the building department. So the reason that the housing committee asked us to bring this today was because to get that type of information is gonna probably require input from Ed and input probably from Mary Ann. And the board should say that that's something that is okay. And if the board approves that, then the housing committee would be willing to work with Larry and Ed and Mary Ann to get this application in. Once the application's in, you're just on the list of being a pro-housing community. And then if, for instance, the Mid-Hudson Momentum Fund for Empire State Development is something that I think David, had pointed out to me, something that we very well might qualify.
I have a question for you. I'm actually in favor of doing this, but this is typical of New York State. I'm assuming this is where this came from. You have this list of grants, and after it, it says, achieving pro-housing communities designation is not required prior to applying to any of the above grants, and applicants will not be penalized for not having the designation. So,
Right.
no, but my question is, what's the point? If they're
Not
telling you
being penalized is different than
receiving priority.
being priority, right?
All right.
Getting priority. I mean,
Subtle,
in
but-
my mind, that's the difference.
So what exactly, this Mid-Hudson Momentum Fund, does that mean money goes to developers who are willing to do it, or does it go to the board or the village?
Well, it's a good question, and I don't know the exact answer. David, I don't know if you know any more. David, was that a
It's
pace?
given to the municipality. Minimum grant is 2.5 million, maximum is 10 million,
And what do we do with it?
anything you want.
Develop housing.
No, it's not.
That's the focus of it.
That grant is separate.
Mhm.
It's meant to be a carrot that the governor has added to also make you interested in housing. And it's sort of saying, their basic idea on that was like, well, you're doing this nice housing, we don't want you to just stick an apartment building beside the train station, we want some amenities there. We want you to have a shopping district, trees, plants, whatever, this is money for that.
All right, but it's at least peripherals for a housing project, so it's not
It's not
completely.
attached to the housing
Yeah,
project.
I can't use it to fix the dam, though, I mean.
No.
Because you put a dog park on the stage.
That's right.
Couldn't use
Put 'em back on the
it as a
list.
Where do
text.
people live on the stage?
So,
Obviously, there are particulars,
Yeah.
but.
so I would ask
So
you,
no,
I would ask,
for that, no.
I would ask everyone just to take a quick look, you have to do it right now, at the actual resolution, because it has to be that resolution. I originally thought that our resolution, which is actually better than this one, would be okay, but I guess New York State wants you to agree to this. So you don't have to look at it right now, but I would like the board to, I guess at the next meeting, to at least allow the housing committee to move forward.
Yeah.
One last thing I would mention that's independent of this, not totally independent of this, but, you know, the housing committee did a lot of work in planning for the possibility prior to the formation of the facilities committee to look at the DPW spot and to work with housing down there. One of the requirements that's gonna have to happen to be able to do any development, transit-oriented development down there, would be changing the zoning down there.
Sure.
And you know, David and I had this conversation yesterday. I'm not sure, you know, I'd like us to be thinking about that and talking about that, but I'm not sure the order that we can do that, given that the facilities committee is looking, I guess, both at DPW and the firehouse. And in my experience in our doing the new zoning at North Broadway, what made that most effective and efficient was we had in mind what we wanted to go there. And if we don't yet have in mind what we want to go there, it may be difficult to actually change that zoning. So I'm not sure what comes first, but it is something that I want to be on the board's mind, because if we want to get something done down there, that zoning change has to precede anything else that we're gonna do in terms of planning.
Right, but how do we even know what change to make if we don't?
So that's the question.
So the comprehensive plan specifically recommends that the board undertake a study of that area down by the train station, and it doesn't define it exactly, but the area at the lower part of Main Street, to study that area for ways to make it amenable to transit-oriented projects.
So the question again is, how does that
So,
combine with the, or does it?
Yeah,
Can
are
it
we
be
not
something that
doing
can be
that
done
then?
independently?
I would do it independently.
I'm sorry?
I would do it independently. I wouldn't wait for a facilities report, because
Yes.
the reality
So that's
is.
something that the housing committee has a lot of interest in getting involved with, because they've got experience at this point
I'd at least
in
tell them,
working
and
with
I mean,
affordable housing.
you may be on both sides of this, of the lines, which means you can convey, you know, what's going on.
It should work in parallel.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I don't think they're gonna feel
But-
bent out of shape
but to
about
just
it.
not even think about it until after you've got facilities.
Yeah.
You're wasting time.
Yeah.
And I think the concept of understanding what is best practice in Westchester and New York State for zoning changes that would facilitate getting the money and the grants that we need, that's an investigative process that we could go through in coordination with Mary Ann, and then be able to, once we've decided, you know, this works for that, and we want 20 units or 80 units or whatever it is, we at least know what should go in the zoning that's gonna make it most profitable for, profit is the wrong word.
I know what you mean.
Affordable,
Yes.
and give us the extra grant money that comes in as a result of it, that will fund the other project, which is moving DPW.
Right, the only thing I'm thinking, and I'm not saying, I'm just saying it has to be accounted for, I'm not saying it's fatal, is it, wherever DPW has to move somewhere, right? But also I know the facilities committee is gonna be looking at relocating the firehouse and other things possibly as well. So how do we know there'll be a place for DPW to go? Do you see what I'm saying?
Well, we don't,
Okay,
but there are places on the map that it could go.
okay.
So, and that will be the decision that you guys will have to make, or the community.
Right.
But that wouldn't necessarily change,
The critical point is.
make it that we couldn't do the zoning to allow for transit oriented.
Right. I guess what I was thinking was to be like explicit about it is, so we go through this whole process, right? To try and do this, and then, you know, that with the idea being that DPW will go to site A, but the facilities committee then gets together and decides that the firehouse should be at site A. And then what happens? Then there's this log jam of
Well,
where
but it
it's
still
like
doesn't
chess
change,
pieces.
but it still doesn't change the fact that we could put zoning in place that could allow
If-
for that to happen.
You don't even have to put it in place, you have to just know what it's going to be.
So we know what's
Because
in place.
the money to move DPW is coming from the value of the site.
Right.
Westchester County will give us market value for that site, which will be well over 8 or 10 million. So that money is what the village can do anything they want with it. In addition, Westchester County is giving any other money that's needed for facilities in the area for the housing to improve that site.
Right.
Pretty simple, right?
No,
See, you talk
you
to
understand
David,
my
you talk to
concern,
David.
right?
I understand your concern, but we're not moving DPW unless we have money to move it somewhere.
I understand, right, I get it.
So that
there's
gives
not
us
gonna
an
be-
incentive to find another spot.
Right. What I'm saying is if it turned out that site A ends up being something the facilities committee wants to use for something else, then we would just find a site B because we'd have the money to do that.
Yeah,
Right.
and that area makes a lot of sense for this kind of housing.
And,
Yeah.
right, and by
course,
the way,
of course, I favor that.
by the way, there are other places within the transit-oriented development area, independent of the DPW building, that we could still do work in.
Some of whom exist already.
Yeah, but I mean, the,
Parking lots,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
you know,
you should,
firehouse location, you know, things like that could also be considered part of a transit-oriented development.
It's close, the firehouse is close enough to the train.
Unfortunately, the whole village is within the transit-oriented development arc.
Go ahead,
but you should be looking at the zoning down along North and South Astor Street, which is the way we define it in the comprehensive plan.
Yes.
You should be looking at that zoning, not with, and not, your primary focus is how can we maximize the use of the DPW property? You should be looking at it because you want to decide what you want in that area for this village.
Mhm.
That's a place where you should have more housing and more dense housing and maybe taller housing, you know, whatever, but you
Right,
should.
and less parking requirement.
Exactly, all of that, and that's the zoning that you should be doing.
Right, so that's what the housing committee, you know, took from the meetings that Larry and I went to with them. And they wanna work on that, you know, and they would love the board to tell them to go ahead and.
Like I said, I was only worried about undermining the facilities committee's work, but if it's not gonna undermine that, then we should figure it out.
I
and
guess two
pass the
things,
zoning.
yeah, I guess two things, right, like, not necessarily undermining their work, but how do you coordinate that so that they're not tripping over each other?
Well, there are there's a couple of
Duplicate
duplicate
members.
members.
Right.
And I would tell them up front when we come up with whatever we're gonna propose here with regard to the zoning. I'll just let them know what's happening.
Just,
And to the extent they wanna participate, you know, if it's Dave or Arthur or whoever,
I
there's
guess,
no harm in it.
Facilities isn't interested in looking at zoning themselves.
Okay.
They're going to come back to you and say,
Well, they'll tell me that.
you go hire somebody.
Yeah, it's fine.
I mean, the one thing that I think is interesting, right, is going to be, and I think it's just like a communication issue, right, which is to be very clear. Because what you don't want is to have like, okay, we've given you this mandate, but really the housing committee is already really just
I
gonna
agree.
work on that one site and already gonna be running with the ball, right? So you have to say,
Right.
here's what they're doing, here's why.
Right, and that's been my
And
concern.
coordinate,
And that's what I meant by undermine, you know?
Yeah.
Well, bottom line, there's only so many places that we could possibly add housing at all.
It's true.
yeah,
So,
but the issue.
Those are the only places that you
No,
can consider
I
changing
agree.
social.
I agree with you, but what you don't want to happen is like, hey, by
So
the way,
the
we were
zoning
thinking we
side.
were gonna put like the firehouse there and this, and like now you threw our whole plan off because you were trying to put housing there, that's all. Just like a coordination issue. And for sure, transparency, okay?
Yeah,
So we
and
just
again,
for
I don't think we
18
wanna
stories
make any
skyscraper,
changes.
Yeah.
We
Glass.
just wanna know what the changes might be
That's what you
when we
want.
decide what area we wanna do it in.
All right, well, thanks for, you know, again, this was one of those other things
Yeah,
that
and
I
I'm
had asked.
I'm okay with having looked at the resolution and I think participated in the New York State program that actually discussed this. I'm okay with the resolution.
I gave a quick look at the resolution, it seemed to be very like
Yeah, they won't let you change it, but I would have liked to have said, and we have done and will endeavor to do, but you can't change, you can't edit it at all. So,
I think we can add that in though, with our other documentations.
perhaps, yeah.
Right, I don't know what the actual application looks like, which we'll find out. And actually David had a suggestion of reaching out to Tiffany at the Pace Center to see if she thought there was something that could give us a super.
So,
No, just in
All
her
right.
experience.
we got one last thing, review of draft local law amending chapter 148 nuisances pertaining to gas powered sprayers. So, in 60 seconds or less. The original law had a flaw in it, and that is that I think you were targeting portable gas-powered leaf blowers and sprayers, and what wasn't considered is the circumstance, what you would need to treat, for example, beech leaf disease, and I happen to have a huge cover beech. No, we did discuss it, which is why I'm gonna do it in 60 seconds or less. A motorized sprayer that shows up on a truck is not I don't believe what was intended to be prohibited originally. It was the people walking around with gas-powered sprayers or blowers. And so what this does is it says gas-powered leaf blowers and portable sprayers, so that when the truck pulls up to my house or anybody else's and is trying to put, whatever that oil is that fights beech leaf disease, it can actually do it.
Yeah,
Good
I
enough?
think we didn't even have sprayers originally, but I think the chief said that it's problematic to not have sprayers because people can argue with them when they show up, oh, this isn't a leaf blower, it's a sprayer.
For context, the board had a work session before the December, when it was gonna snap in, to decide whether or not we should let it snap in or we should delay it or something like that. And the chief came to that meeting and said what Larry just said.
Yeah, and I don't even disagree with having the sprayers in there. It's just the concept of if it's
That's what it was
a
meant
huge
for.
thing on the back of a truck. It's not a guy standing there with a blower standing on the back of a
And
truck.
it's very specific and targeted.
Yeah.
It's not something you do every day or every week, and so.
So this will show
But
up.
the law previously had banned gas-powered sprayers. That phrase, gas-powered
Yeah.
sprayers, right now, they're banned.
Right.
So, and that was put in back when the original law was adopted, because someone made the argument that, they had a picture of a backpack sprayer spraying stuff in a backyard, like in gardens and plants and stuff. And people said, well, that can't be good, so let's put that in there too. So that's how it got in there. But no one really thought about a truck that's needed to
reach
spray
100
a
feet up.
50 or 100-foot tree, which is clearly not being done by a backpack.
Is it clear to everybody when they read that line 10 there that gas powered applies to both, right? Originally, all Mary Ann did was add the word portable, right? So it all.
She had a backpack or other portable sprayer.
Fine, so gas powered applies to both.
I mean, grammatically, it could mean either, right? I mean, it's like, it's not, if we wanna be safe, we could say gas-powered leaf blowers and gas-powered portable sprayer.
But you had it that way already and
It was
interpreted
any
as-
gas-powered leaf blower or sprayer at any time.
I'm okay with it.
So this
That's
just
fine. It's okay.
modifies.
You are technically right, and that's what I was agonizing over for all of 20 seconds. But I think given that it was already that way and interpreted that way, I could live with just sticking in.
I was just
portable.
giving from the copy editing professor's point of view, either of those. are
That's why I look at you.
Correct.
All right.
All right, so we'll announce this for a public hearing at the
Okay.
next meeting to be held in whenever the next meeting is
Sounds
after
good.
that.
I'm gonna make a motion to adjourn unless people have some other fun.
Second.
Oh, no, we're not taking whatever you wanna say,
No more.
except the
No more.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.